Love the intro song. Welcome in, everybody. Today is November 16th. You're watching The Line with Justin and Seth, and you are not deceived. This is our first time on screen together, and I'm terribly excited for it. My kitten's so excited that he jumped on my lap right now to see Seth even more clearly, a man who needs absolutely no introduction, a legend in the community. Seth, glad to have you, buddy.
Hey, it's good to see you and your kitty. I'm one of those people where, hey, the more the merrier. Like when I'm doing shows, I've got Linus and Gracie, my dogs, at my feet, and occasionally Cat will walk around. The problem is that, they're small dogs who think they are Irish wolfhounds. And so anything can happen while we're recording, when I'm on the air, whatever. So a car can go by. It's the mailman. It can be UPS. It can be a butterfly that flies by the window and they go into freaking orbit and I'm rushing for the mute button. It's just one of those weird first world problems that only happens in the online age. But dude, it's an honor to meet you finally, and it's an honor to co-host the show. So, I'm at your disposal, man. Whatever I can do to serve you and the audience, just, let me know.
Well, it is quite exciting. Now, Seth, while we're waiting for some callers to call up, there's some events that some of the audience should know about that you're going to be hosting sometime soon. Can you fill us in?
What an amazingly unprompted question from the host of the show. Wow, how serendipitous is that? Thank you, Justin. So anyway, anybody who watches The Line knows Gutsick Gibbon, knows Forrest Valkai, and is familiar with their whip-smart brains and their ability to enthusiastically communicate science with sarcasm, and they're wildly entertaining. And you put them in the same room, and it's just, time doesn't exist. They did a stream 4, 6, 8, 12 hours. I can't even imagine. But I've had them on my show. We've sat in the room. They live pretty close. Forrest is like 15 minutes from me. And every time we get together, every time we see each other, I'm always like, I would love to do an event with the three of us in the buckle of the Bible Belt, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Jesus Town, Oklahoma. And they're like, we're game. Let's do it. And I talked about it. It's been 10 years since I've actually organized one of my own events, but I know how it's done. So I contacted the OU Schusterman Center, which is a campus of Oklahoma University in Tulsa. It's a great auditorium, and signed the contract and went through all the insurance, and we're going to have security. We got to do all this other stuff, and then the promotional page and the ticket page, and going through all of that, and it's finally done. So it's myself, Forrest Valkai, Gutsick Gibbon. Erica is amazing. And we're all going to take the stage for 3 hours, March the 7th, 2026. That's an afternoon of a Saturday, March 7th. If you want tickets, they just started going out, and they're starting to go kind of fast. So just go to thethinkingatheist.com, and you'll see the banner right there, and you can click on it for details. But I'm jazzed. The challenge is going to be 2 hours. We're going to do an hour of just more formal's not the word, but then we're going to do audience participation. The clock's going to fly. How in the world am I going to keep these two down to a 3-hour event? They're going to have to be sedated. I'm going to need a blowgun with a tranquilizer dart and just boom, and then they're carried out to the parking lot, and then they are transported home. But I'm looking forward to having that problem. Thethinkingatheist.com has everything you need. Thank you, Justin, for letting me slug it, because I'm excited. It gets me out of the studio, gets me out of this sort of immediate circle where I'm surrounded by, you can throw a rock in this city and hit 3 churches. Where are you based, Justin? Where do you live?
So I'm actually in the sprawling metropolis of Akron, Ohio, which it's Midwest. If you've been to the Midwest, you know what I'm talking about.
So is Akron churchy?
Yeah, we're churchy.
Is that buddy. A stupid question? That's a stupid question, isn't it? Sorry about that.
You know what, though? unlike the Bible Belt, we have a lot more mainline denominations like Catholics. Protestant is still here, but we have a lot of Methodists and Lutherans and a lot of mainline churches. I feel like in the South, there's a disproportionate mixture of like various independent fundamentalist Baptist churches. We have a lot less of that here.
Yeah, we've got the hardline Southern Baptist types. There's biblical literalists, and they like to sit around judging people, and then they pass the offering plate. And then we do have some of the more progressive ones. Life Church is big here, and they're more of the Joel Osteen, happy clappy, God loves you, and well, sin, hell, we're not going to talk about that. Well, come as you are, and let's all be a family. It's the motivational speaker angle to church. We have they're really Assembly of Gods, but they call them non-denominational. Not
Right.
Pentecostal, no speaking in tongues, but it's more of an experiential church. But where you are, then are you saying it's more like Episcopal type stuff? Like,
You get a
uh,
lot of Episcopals, yep, certainly, and a little bit less of the like hyper literalistic Bible traditions where I'm
yeah.
at. But yeah, we've got a pretty good mix still. Yeah, like you're not stuck with one single train of arguments to work with. So when people find me in public, I'll have a good diversity of arguments. But to be fair, and thankfully, most people who find me in public are fellow atheists that are shocked that they saw me in the wild. Christians
Dude,
don't typically argue me in the wild.
there's a guy who works at TSA in Tulsa, and I see him about every third or fourth time I go through the airport. And he's like, "Hey, where you headed today?" And I'll tell him, and we'll high five and whatnot, and nobody else has any idea that, that we know each other and that he's a listener. I was at Walmart Neighborhood Market yesterday. And of course, I'm scabbed out. I mean, just grubby clothes, bedhead. I'm tired. I'm cranky. I'm sitting there shopping for almond milk or whatever else was on the list. And I hear this, "Hey, love the show." And I was like, oh, shit. Like, oh, gotta, oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it's so great. Appreciate you very, very much. And then I'm, scamper off. But it's always an honor. It's always an amazing thing when people say, because you know what it's like. We sit in a room with a microphone or a camera, and the signal goes out, and you see statistics. You might get the occasional email, we'll get a call, but there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people globally that you never really know. And it's not imposter syndrome, but part of you is like, does it matter? Does it make a difference?
Hmm.
It's just navel gazing. Am I just listening to the sound of my own voice? And so when you meet people who are like, oh my God, I was going through this time in my life, or I heard this show, or I appreciated what you did here, or thanks for this speech, or whatever. It's a rush. It is a gift, and it's medicine. It really pushes you forward and reminds you, the work does matter. And we're all activists, I think, in our own way. And a lot of people are doing great work beyond the cameras and microphones of the online space. And that's just as valid. But thank you to everybody who says kind words, and to see it happen here in Oklahoma. Like, Oklahoma. This place is so freaking religious. And honestly, I'm part of the country. I hate to say we're kind of dumb, but I just look around. I think, I don't know. I'm trying to find the word, Justin. And here's an example. And this isn't. This is the kind of thing that is, I'm sure, popular in Oklahoma and other parts of the country, but probably especially in Bible-y areas. And I don't know why I'm saying this. I don't have any science. This is the absolute truth. I I'm at a hotel. This is a few months ago. Can't sleep, browsing the internet or browsing television, ESPN 5 or whatever it is. There's a sport, and I'm sure you've seen it, called slap fighting. Have you seen these guys?
Oh yeah. Hmm.
For the few who may be uninitiated to this piece of American culture, people go on stage and they stand on each side of a little table, and they stand perfectly still while a guy across from them takes his big meat hook of a hand and powders it up with chalk, chalk like sports talcum type chalk, and then with the full force of his large primate body, or hers, because women do this too, will slap the shit out of the person across from them. And sometimes they do nothing. Sometimes they bounce back. Sometimes they drop to the floor and go unconscious. This competition goes on until by the end, whoever is the champion has a head that is swollen to gourd-like proportions. Literally looks like a holiday gourd you would put out in the yard. I swear to you. And I think, who came up with this? And who wakes up in the morning and says, I'm not sure what my talent or skill set is, but you know what I could do for fame and celebrity and profit? I could have somebody slap the shit out of me on international television.
Yeah.
Well, I just read an article where physicians have come forward and they are warning that professional slap fighting may be damaging to the human brain.
Who could have guessed? Who
I'm
could have
looking around, Justin,
guessed?
going, in other news, water is wet, right? I mean, I'm sorry.
Indeed.
Yes, concussions are running rampant, causing concerns throughout the medical community. And I'm like, the whole thing is them beating the shit out of each other. Anyway,
Mhm.
that's the kind of thing that and an ESPN sport that I actually have fallen in love with, and I can't defend it, but I love it. And it also is popular in my part of the country. Have you seen professional cornhole?
Oh, yes. I know
Oh,
about
yeah.
professional cornhole.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Those guys come out flannel shirts and, khaki shorts, maybe a beer in their left hand for all I know. And they come out and play cornhole professionally, and they got sponsor tags all over.
Mhm.
It is one of the most uniquely American things I have ever seen. But I do like me some pro cornhole. So I don't know why I went off on that bunny trail, but these are the things that occupy my mind. We live in the United States of stupid. I just look around and I think it's not just ignorance, right? It's not just ignorance. But humanity has seen that difference between someone who has simply not benefited from the knowledge economy and people who, if you take them to a fork in the road and you say, to the left is going to be prudence and maturity and temperance and safety and goodness and prosperity and kumbaya. This is to the left. To the right, you may end up in the hospital by decisions of your own making, and you will die broken, alone, and sad. And Americans are like, let me sleep on it. That's the culture we live in. So I've been reflecting on the difference between the ignorant and the stupid in my own mind. I don't know. When you look around at the culture, Justin, do you wonder if we deserve the killer asteroid? Just bring it. Just go out to a big field and just look up into the sky and beg the asteroid to come. That ever occur to you?
If extraterrestrial life came to Earth, they would find no good reason to preserve us. It seems to be the case.
Have you seen that
They would treat us
cartoon
like
where the
cattle.
aliens show up on crucifixion day and they're at the base of Jesus's cross? They see three guys nailed to wood and they're like, "What do you think, Bob?" And he's like, "I think we need to get the fuck out of here."
Yeah.
Anyway, these
Well,
are the
Seth, we've
things that
got one caller on the line. We've got John from, and this must be a coincidence or God. We've got John from Ohio that wanted to talk about the prophecy from the Bible, Isaiah 7:14 specifically, maybe one of the most famous Bible prophecies there is, probably even the first one in the book of Matthew, chapter 1, verse 23. John, welcome on. You're on the line with Justin and Seth. Can you kind of give us what you wanted to go over before we get into it?
Well, how are you guys today?
Can't complain.
groovy.
Good. I've been hearing that Justin has been turning Christians into human pretzels. Is that right?
In Jesus's immortal words, you say so.
Well, that's what's coming up on your replays of YouTube.
Yeah, that seems to be the case because they haven't read the Bible.
Oh, okay. Well, anyways, I was watching that episode of yours where it said that you were turning them into human pretzels, and it was talking about Isaiah 7:14. And it was my understanding that you said that that was Isaiah's biological son, Emmanuel?
No, my position is that it seems to be the most likely case that Emmanuel was a theophoric name given to one of the children of Isaiah. All of Isaiah's sons have theophoric names. In fact, if you go to chapter 8 of Isaiah, he explicitly says that. He indicates that his children have prophetic names. So I have no reason to believe that Emmanuel is a child born 700 years later named Jesus. The context of the passage seems to indicate that Emmanuel was living during the time of King Ahaz. That's why in chapter 7, it states that before this child knows right from wrong, the two kings that are attacking Ahaz, their lands are going to be laid waste. So whoever you think Emmanuel must be alive during the reign of King Ahaz. And there are 3 children in this whole prophecy arc, and all of them actually serve as timelines. It has the first one has a long timeline, then a shorter timeline, and the third child has an even shorter timeline that shows up at the beginning of chapter 8 of Isaiah.
Well, doesn't the word Emmanuel come up in Isaiah 8:8?
It is. So this is actually the argument that I typically make with Christians. It is clear in chapter 8 that Emmanuel is a reference to God's promise to preserve the Israelites, specifically the Judeans, during the war. So as the prophecy from chapter 7 is coming true when the king of Assyria is swooping in, taking out the Arameans, taking out the northern Israelites, and then starting to surround Judea, God's promise was that Judea would stand and Israel and Aram would fall. So as the promise is coming true, the prophet exclaims, "O Emmanuel, take notice, you people, be dismayed. Listen, all you far-off countries, gird yourselves and be dismayed. Take counsel together, but it shall be brought to naught. Speak a word, but it will not stand, for God is with us." Another rendition of Emmanuel. The funny thing is this is actually a standalone unit in a lot of the Hebrew texts. Like in the English Bible, they put Emmanuel at the end of the prior paragraph, but in the Hebrew text, typically the first Emmanuel in chapter 8 and the last Emmanuel in that paragraph are like brackets around the quotation. So what's happening in chapter 8 is it's a confirmation that Emmanuel is not a child born 700 years later. Emmanuel was a reference to the promise of God that God is with you during this time of trouble, which echoes back to the very first prophecy in chapter 7, which is God wants to reassure their faith during the time of trouble. He says, if you do not stand firm in faith, you shall not stand at all. So the whole prophecy from 7 to 8 is about God being with his people as they're being attacked by their enemies, but making sure that their enemies don't prevail against them.
Well, I'm wondering who the Emmanuel is in Isaiah 8:14.
Well, it's the same child mentioned in chapter 7. And to be sure, if you had a theophoric name, it's not always the case that you had just one name. In fact, a lot of people who received prophetic or theophoric names that would be referred to on multiple titles, especially kings. Kings would take on anywhere from 4 to 5 theophoric names in addition to their actual name.
So in 8:14 it says, "He shall be a sanctuary and a stone of stumbling, and for a rock of offense to both the houses of Israel, for a gin and for a snare to the inhabitants of Jerusalem."
Mm-hmm.
Now, who is that Emmanuel that's being spoken of
Yahweh
in 14?
will. No, 14 is not about Emmanuel.
Well, who is he talking about there?
Yahweh. The Lord spoke thus to me while his hand was strong upon me and warned me not to walk in the way of this people. Because remember, they were still wayward. Even though God preserved them, they were still wayward. Remember what King Ahaz did in chapter 7?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the prophecy is not about Emmanuel being a stumbling block for anybody. It says the Lord of hosts.
If you're saying that Isaiah 8:14 is about Yahweh, then you're saying Yahweh would be a sanctuary, a stone of stumbling, and a rock of offense to both the houses of Israel. So we know that another name for Yahweh or Emmanuel would have applied to Jesus.
No, it wouldn't apply to Jesus. He wasn't referred to as Emmanuel, not even once. In fact, the quotation of Emmanuel in the New Testament is not even a correct quotation. It says that they shall call him Emmanuel, but in the Hebrew text, it doesn't say they will call him Emmanuel, like the people. It refers to the parents, and doesn't even say they. It says she. She will name him Emmanuel. So this is not about Jesus, not even the slightest. And verse 13 in chapter 8 says, the Lord of hosts, him you shall regard as holy. Let him be your fear. Let him be your dread. You should fear the Lord, he says. He will become a sanctuary, a stone one strikes against for both houses of Israel. He will become a rock one stumbles over, a trap and a snare for the inhabitants of Jerusalem. That's Yahweh. Because remember, they were wayward. They were wayward people. And the prophecy in chapter 7 is clearly, again, about a child born during the reign of King Ahaz. So unless Jesus was born during the reign of King Ahaz, he doesn't fit the prophecy.
But if Isaiah 8:13 is talking about the Lord of hosts, we know the Lord of hosts is Jesus.
No, it's Yahweh.
Well, we know from the New Testament that the Lord of hosts is Jesus.
No, you don't know that. Because the New Testament contradicts the Old Testament. If Jesus didn't fulfill a single messianic prophecy, and he doesn't even know what's in the Hebrew Bible, then it's irrelevant what the New Testament says. Just like I would never interpret the New Testament through the lens of the Book of Mormon, I would also never interpret the Hebrew Bible through the lens of the New Testament, because they fundamentally don't even know what's in the book, and they certainly couldn't quote it from the Hebrew. 99% of all quotations of the Hebrew Bible are actually from the Greek edition of the Hebrew Bible, and it wasn't a good translation from the Hebrew. It was very spurious on many occasions. The one we're talking about right now, 7:14, is one of them. In Hebrew, it refers to the woman as ha'amah hara. Ha'amah means the young woman. Hara is an adjective for being pregnant. So this is a pregnant young woman who already is with child. In the Greek, it kind of refers to her as becoming pregnant. That being said, Parthenos doesn't always mean virgin. This is the other problem with the New Testament. They couldn't even interpret classical Greek properly. If you read the writings of Homer or even some of the Septuagint, 2 times in the Greek Septuagint, we find women that are referred to as Parthenos after they've already had sex. So we know in classical Greek from the Bible and also from Homer and other Greek literature that a Parthenos was not always a woman who never had sex. It could just be a young woman. By the time the New Testament came around, Matthew didn't know this. The people who were speaking Greek at that time, they didn't have a handle on the semantic range of Parthenos from classical Greek. So when they saw Parthenos in the Greek Septuagint, they assumed that it was referring to an actual virgin birth when it wasn't. The New Testament is full of blunders. They have no idea what they're doing with the Hebrew Bible. They're completely untrained and uneducated, and it shows.
Well, if we read Isaiah 8:15, it says, and many among them shall stumble and fall and be broken and be snared and be taken. When did that happen?
It happened all throughout the culture. So remember, this is written prior to the Assyrian invasion. So we're talking about 730 to 720 BCE. The Judeans will be in captivity in less than 200 years. The next 200 years, the Judeans proved this prophecy to be true by constantly rebelling against Yahweh and then eventually being led astray into captivity in 605 by Nebuchadnezzar and those that followed Nebuchadnezzar.
But Isaiah isn't talking about the Babylonians. He's talking about the Assyrians.
I know, you got it. Yeah. Yep. The Judeans are the focus of the future prophecy about being a stumbling block. The Israelites in the north are already in captivity. They're done. They're gone. They've been carried away in chapter 8.
But in verse 14, he's talking about a snare to the inhabitants of Jerusalem.
Yeah, Jerusalem's in
Judea.
Judea. Yeah, Jerusalem's in Judea. The kingdom of Judea includes Jerusalem.
But Judea was spared from the Assyrians.
Follow me here. The Assyrians have already come and invaded the land in chapter 8. The part that you're quoting is after the Assyrian invasion.
So when were they taken? When were the inhabitants of Judea? When were the inhabitants
from 605
of Jerusalem?
From 605 to 587, they were they were laid waste by the Babylonians. There was like 5 different incursions by the Babylonians over the course of that time period, and that's what it took to defeat what was left of Judeans.
Isaiah is not talking about the Babylonians.
He is.
No, he's not.
He is.
He's talking about.
No, the Assyrians are already invaded.
He's talking about a future time.
I know, the Babylonians.
He's talking about a time when the Lord of hosts would be a sanctuary and a stone of stumbling to the people in Jerusalem and a rock of offense to the people in Jerusalem, and many of them would stumble and fall and be broken and be snared.
And they did. Their entire history was just that. That's why God said he's bringing the Babylonians against them. So again, the problem that you have here is like you're fundamentally not understanding any of the context of this passage, not chapter 7, not chapter 8. What you're trying to do is say, listen, if I just ignore all the context and find like this one little thing that I don't understand, I can just shove Jesus into it. But that's not how reading the Bible works. You have to understand the context. The context is the Assyrian and post-Assyrian invasion. In chapter 8, the Assyrians already came in. It describes them coming in. The king of Assyria invades in the very beginning of chapter 8.
But nobody, from verse 15, nobody was taken.
Yes, they were.
By the Assyrians?
15 is about the future, is it not?
It wasn't about the Babylonians.
I didn't ask you about that. Is it about the future?
Yes.
Okay. So if the Assyrians have already come in and have already carried away the northern tribes, and then there's a prophecy for the future saying that the Judeans, namely those in Jerusalem, they're going to be broken, they're going to be taken. We know when that happened. It says they shall be a snare and be taken. They were taken during the invasion of the Babylonians. This is a future prophecy. The Assyrian invasion already came true.
They were taken during the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD.
No, they were not. They were taken in 136 during the Bar Kokhba revolt. They were still there in Judea during the Bar Kokhba revolt. So Jerusalem was attacked. They weren't taken and carried off. There were still Israelites in Judea during the time period. They didn't get run out of the land or taken anywhere until 136 under Hadrian. So they were specifically taken and carried away by the Babylonians, which is something Isaiah writes about a lot. If you just read all the rest of Isaiah, about 2/3 of the book of Isaiah is about the Babylonian invasion.
The Romans took off several prisoners from Jerusalem during the
I'm sure they did.
Jerusalem in 70 AD.
I'm sure they did, and it has nothing to do with Jesus, and it has nothing to do with Isaiah.
And verse 14 is talking about Jesus being a stone of stumbling and
certainly
a rock
not.
of offense.
It explicitly says that the stone is the Lord of hosts, verse 13. This is where context is really important, John. Verse 13 gives you the antecedent you need. It says, but the Lord of hosts, him you shall regard as holy. Let him be your fear. Let him be your dread. He will become a sanctuary. The he has an antecedent. The antecedent is the Lord of hosts, Yahweh specifically. The name alone, which every knee shall bow. Isaiah 45 contradicts the New Testament. It says every knee will bow to the name of Yahweh, not to the name of Jesus. There's a reason why the Jews fundamentally rejected Jesus' movement, and they had to move to the Greek-speaking people because the Jewish people read the Hebrew Bible, and the Hebrew Bible does not support Jesus as Messiah. He didn't fulfill a single messianic prophecy.
So if Yahweh preserved the Judeans from the Assyrian attack, how could Yahweh be the stone of stumbling? If you're saying that Yahweh is not Jesus,
because it's a future prophecy.
I know it is, but it wasn't about the Babylonians. It was about the Romans.
You can say that all you want, and you're wrong every time.
I disagree.
Well, then give me the evidence that this is about the Romans, because we know for a fact that the book of Isaiah talks about the Babylonian captivity a lot. He doesn't know anything about the Romans. Also, it's completely irrelevant because this has nothing to do with Jesus. Nothing. Whether or not you think this is about 70 AD is irrelevant. Jesus didn't have anything to do with 70 AD either.
Jesus is the Emmanuel in Isaiah 8:14.
He's certainly not. You haven't established that whatsoever. You can say it all you want. It won't be true. Every time you say it, it's still false.
He was a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense to both the houses of Israel.
Well, not according to Isaiah. Isaiah says that Yahweh is.
Well, we know that Jesus is Yahweh.
No, you don't know that. The Trinity is a flawed concept right from the gate. The Trinity breaks the laws of logic. You don't believe in the law of identity if you believe in the Trinity. So Jesus simply cannot be Yahweh unless he's identical to Yahweh. That's how transitive properties work. But Jesus certainly wasn't identical to Yahweh because the Trinitarian doctrine entails that he is distinct from Yahweh. You can't be distinct from something and be 100% identical to it. So that means Jesus cannot be Yahweh.
Have you ever read the account of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah?
You mean in the Bible, Genesis chapter 19, 20? Yeah, I read it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know. You want to quote the part where it says Yahweh rained down fire out of heaven from Yahweh? Did you bother to read in the Talmud why it says this? You know that it talks about, God talks about himself in the third person all the time in the Bible. In fact, so does Lamech. If you read the Talmud, they point this out in Genesis. In Genesis, when it gives the lineage of Lamech, Lamech himself refers to himself in the third person. Sometimes the Bible does this. The reason why it does it, not because Jesus is hiding in there. It does it because sometimes the stories originally were in the third person and they got modified over the course of time in editing to be first person, and third person remnants remained in the text. You have a Jesus of the grammatical gaps, and that's just not how theology works.
Well, I'm wondering in Genesis 19:24 how Yahweh could be in two places at one time.
He's not. He's in heaven. If you read the prior chapter, he went back. Only the two angels go to Sodom and Gomorrah. There's three men that show up to Abraham. One of them's Yahweh. Two of them are angels. The two angels go on to Sodom. Yahweh goes back.
And 24, it says, Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven.
Yeah, so I know. I just quoted it to you. It's like you weren't listening. Did you hear my response?
Yeah, so there's two different individuals there that are called Yahweh.
There is not. There's only one Yahweh. Deuteronomy 6:4, the Shema, Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one.
No, there's
only
two
one
spoken of. No,
there's not. Are there two Lamechs in Genesis then?
Two what?
Are there two Lamechs in Genesis?
I don't know about that, but I know in verse 24 there's two Yahwehs. There is.
John, do you see how bad your argumentation is? You're making Seth regret that this call is happening right now. His eyes are rolling so far back in his head, he can see the wall behind him.
Any eyes. I have not been dismissive or disrespectful. Honestly, I'm amazed at how you don't need me at all for this call. You are so much better at this as far as Old Testament not apologetics, but understanding Old Testament history, translations, the Greek and the Hebrew, and how they relate, and doing it extemporaneously. Well, I'm like, holy shit, I'm just going to sit back and watch you do what you do, man. I am unnecessary to this conversation. So I'm interested, but I also hear that John is not really listening, or I disagree is not an argument. And so I think he's asking you, John, what evidence can you bring to the table? I mean, Yahweh can rain down sulfur, but he is omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent. He is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. He can do whatever the hell he wants to do anyway. So why would you even bother thinking, oh, shit, he's not at point A or point B? How can that happen? What kind of God can't be at point A and point B, John? I mean, that's kind of where my brain goes.
Well, let me ask you, Seth, since you came in on this, in verse 24, are there two Yahwehs there?
I was dragged in. I was dragged in by Justin. I don't know.
There's one
I don't.
Yahweh.
From the quoting of the scriptures, we see one deity, and that's it. But my point is, whether Yahweh returned to heaven or not doesn't make any difference, because according to Christian theology and the foundational texts and the dogmas of the Christian church en masse, Yahweh is not constrained by space-time. Yahweh can do whatever Yahweh wants. So the idea that you would stop and say, well, did he park over on the south end of the building or did he park on the north end of the building? To me, makes me think, what the hell are you doing with your time, John? Are these the arguments you want to have?
Seth, all I'm asking you, if there's two Yahwehs in verse 24.
Jesus Christ, how many times do I answer the same question? There's one Yahweh. But I'm stuck on this sort of limiting of what Yahweh is supposed to be able to say and do. Let me ask you a question. Let's say you're quoting out of the book of Genesis. I'm just curious. Can you tell me what human author wrote that book? Can you tell me, you're drawing all of this wisdom and historical knowledge, facts, hashtag facts from the Old Testament. So whether it's Isaiah, whether it's the book of Genesis, whether it's Matthew chapter 1 and the reference to Emmanuel there, who wrote those books that you are leaning so heavily on right now?
Well, since you know that there's only one Yahweh, then you would know the answer.
That's not
hang on.
The
No,
question.
no. I have not had a stroke. I did not just have a mild stroke. I was just dumbstruck. I'm not a good slap fighter, John, but I'm asking you, let's say we assume that the scriptures were worth taking seriously, scientifically, historically, and morally. Would not sourcing those scriptures be part of that journey? So I'm asking you, if you're going to draw from the book of Genesis, where did it come from and how do you know that?
Different people wrote Genesis.
Who wrote Genesis? What different people? And how do you know that?
Well, in the book of Genesis, we talk about different people writing histories.
Who wrote Genesis and how do you know that?
Different people.
Which specific people? Do they have proper names?
Phil Collins.
I was thinking, I don't know. I was thinking Hawthorne or Stephen King or, I don't know. Who wrote Genesis? Like who put pen to parchment or whatever and created the book from which you are now drawing? The same book that talks about a couple of garden nudists who were cosmically created and chatted up talking snakes before being expelled to commit incest to populate the planet. I'm just saying. The one that talks about the 500-year-old guy captaining the giant floating zoo filled with anacondas, camels, hamsters, and penguins. The same deity. Actually, no, Balaam, that's Numbers, not Genesis. Sorry. I'm asking, isn't sourcing our material part of the journey we're taking, John? Who wrote the book of Genesis?
Different people.
Thanks for calling, John. I'm done with it. Justin, he's all yours, pal. I'm going to sit back and just watch you do what you do. You're better at this than I am anyway. Go ahead.
No, that's certainly not true. This is just my pet topic.
So
John,
good.
Okay. John, you're kind of, you should be believing that Moses at least wrote the Torah. You believe that?
Well, they say that
Who's they?
They say that Moses wrote the law.
Who's they?
I'm pretty sure Jesus said that in Matthew 19.
Yeah. The law of Moses.
All right. So if Moses wrote the Torah, that should be the answer. The rest of the books, that's a different story. Okay. So if Moses wrote it, that's a very important thing. Now, are you aware that in Genesis?
I didn't say that Moses wrote all of Genesis. I said he wrote the portion of the Torah that is the law.
Sure. Yeah. You can say that. We're not worried about that just yet. We can get around to that later. All right. In Genesis, though, I want you to answer a question. Read Genesis 4:23. It says, Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice. You wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. Are there two Lamechs?
No, it says, hear my voice.
Yeah, but he refers to himself as Lamech. He says, you wives of Lamech.
Yeah.
So it's not a problem
So
for
what?
people, especially in Genesis, to refer to themselves in the third person, or to refer
Well, you're talking about
to
the-
Yahweh, or to refer to Yahweh as though he's, as Seth might have said, multi-locational, or even just to grant that in Genesis 19:24 that Yahweh is back in the heavens. Like if I said, Seth rained down a fire argument from Seth on the screen. No one believes there are two Seths. We know he's the only Seth on screen. Is it clunky wording? Sure. Is there clunky wording elsewhere in the Bible? Yes. There's a lot of clunky words in the Bible. There are a lot of phrases where people talk about themselves in the third person. There's a lot of times where God talks about himself in the third person. In fact, there's some passages like in Isaiah 42 where we're not even sure who's talking in the first, second, or third person because it changes so frequently. The Bible just does that sometimes. You can't pigeonhole Jesus into something just because you're like, oh, here's a weird grammatical anomaly. Let's just stick Jesus in here, even though he fulfilled 0 messianic prophecies, couldn't even read the Bible in Hebrew, and lied onto what the Bible said. Are you aware that Jesus lied on the Bible?
So going back to Isaiah 8:14, who's he talking about there?
You're never
Who's
going to learn
Isaiah
anything.
talking about?
Isaiah's talking about Yahweh because he says so. He says Yahweh. All right.
Right.
So here's what's going to happen, John. I want you to listen to me. I'm not going to do this for another hour with you not listening to me. So stop. Stop, John. Hold on.
Wait.
John, stop. Nope. I'm not waiting. You're waiting. John, open your Bible. Do you have one?
I just want to know if you think that Yahweh is a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense.
Jesus
yes,
Christ.
because Isaiah said so. So open your Bible. We're going to go how sentence structure works, okay? I'm going to show you what antecedents do. What's that, Seth?
No. I'm sorry. I'm just whispering to myself, wondering how can I escape the hell that John has dragged us into. But I do have questions about prophecy when we are done with John, because I'm going to pick your brain when we're finished with him. But go ahead.
Sure
I'll sit back and watch.
So, John, if I say Seth is tired of this conversation, he would rather nuke you with the drop button. Do you know who the he is?
Just to be clear, you're saying that Yahweh is a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense. Is that right?
I didn't say it. Isaiah said it. So we'll try this again. If I told you that Seth wants to nuke you with the drop button, he would rather end this conversation. Do you know who the he is?
Well, let's proceed.
The pronoun in the sentence refers to Seth. Seth is the antecedent in the sentence structure. So when it says that the Lord of hosts you shall regard, him you will keep holy and fear, him you will dread, he will become a sanctuary. All these pronouns are referring to Yahweh. There's no mystical pronoun that magically introduces itself into the sentence about a fictitious character that comes, 700 years later. So the reality is you're never going to fit Jesus into these weird, like what you think are grammatical anomalies or even like non-grammatical anomalies like Isaiah chapter 8, because Jesus just doesn't fit. And we do have actual messianic prophecies that you could look at. Like there are real messianic prophecies that talk about what the Messiah is going to do. Do you think Jesus did any of them?
Well, I just wanted to clarify this point about the Emmanuel of Isaiah 7:14. To me, that isn't the son of Isaiah.
Well, that's meaningless just to say, nuh-uh, that's not an actual argument. In Isaiah 7:14, is the child already conceived?
The child in 7:14 is the Lord of hosts.
Nope, I didn't ask that. Yeah. I said, is the child already conceived according to the Hebrew text?
It says the virgin shall conceive.
I didn't. No, it doesn't say that. We'll try this again. According to the Hebrew text, what does it say about the child in 7:14?
Therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son.
No.
And
Are you
shall
in the
call
King
his name
James?
Emmanuel.
New King James? That's not in the Hebrew text. That's being superimposed in your Bible from the New Testament. The Hebrew text doesn't say that.
Well, that's what my Bible says.
Well, you should throw it away then. Your Bible's lying to you. The adjective hara does not mean will conceive. In fact, if you use hara as a verb, it's past tense and it's masculine. So unless you think that the woman in this passage was masculine and conceived in the past tense, hara is an adjective. It's a pregnant young woman, ha'ama. This is not a problem. Your Bible is lying to you. You should get a real translation. Get a good like NRSV translation or an NABR, and it'll tell you what it actually says. Stop buying Bibles that lie to you.
I would go by the Septuagint.
Why? Why would you go by the Septuagint?
Because
Was
it's
the Bible
better than the
was the
Masoretic.
was the Hebrew Bible written in Greek?
No, it was translated into Greek.
Yeah, and sometimes quite spuriously. So the Hebrew Bible is the original. I want to go by the original, not by some wayward translation that came later.
Do you have an original Hebrew Bible?
Nobody has an original anything Bible because we don't have any original manuscripts, which seems quite to be God's problem, not my problem. Because if God was interested in preserving his word, he could have just preserved it. In fact, if he was interested in us knowing his word, he could have not confused everybody's languages in Genesis.
Why do you think Isaiah 7:14 is wrong if you don't have the original Hebrew Bible?
It's wrong no matter if you're reading it in Greek or Hebrew. In neither edition of the Greek nor the Hebrew does it talk anything about a virgin conceiving a child and giving birth. And we already went over this. Parthenos does not always entail, no, it doesn't. Parthenos does not always entail that a woman is unwed or never actually conceived. That's a grammatical mistake that was made by Matthew, because Matthew is a dunce. Matthew is spuriously misquoting the Hebrew Bible at every turn. He has no idea what to do with it. For example, Jeremiah 31:15. You know Jeremiah 31:15, right?
No, let me look it up.
Yeah, Jeremiah says, "Thus saith the Lord, a voice is heard in Ramah, lamentation and bitter weeping. Rachel is weeping for her children. She refuses to be comforted, for her children are no more. Thus saith the Lord, keep your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears. There's a reward for your work, says the Lord. They shall come back from the land of the enemy." Cool. So you know what Jeremiah is talking about. He's talking about the Israelite children being carried away in captivity for 70 years. Chapter 25 and chapter 29 say that the Israelites are going to be taken captive by the Babylonians for 70 years, and they're going to come back to their own country. We have a repeat of this prophecy in chapter 31, which is why he tells the mothers of the Israelites not to weep. They're going to come back from the land of the enemy. Can we agree on the basic meaning of Jeremiah?
Well, Jeremiah is talking about the Babylonians, and Isaiah is talking about the Assyrians.
I'm not asking about Isaiah. I'm asking about Jeremiah. Is Jeremiah referring to the children coming back from Babylon? Yes or no?
I think he's talking about both.
I'm not asking you about the Assyrians. Well, you know what? That's the wrong answer, but it's enough to get us to the next point. He's not talking about both, because this passage in Jeremiah, the Assyrian invasion was already past. It's already been over for almost 200 years. So he's certainly not talking about the invasion that already happened. Jeremiah is writing maybe around 605, 606, and he's talking to the Israelites as they're being taken away in captivity by the Babylonians. That's why he says they'll come back from the land of the enemy. That's good enough. I don't care if you think the Assyrians are involved. I want to move on to the next point. It's the last point we're going to make, and then we're going to get another caller in here who's actually paying attention to the conversation. Turn your Bible to Matthew 2:17, because Matthew lies on this passage. Matthew says, when the babies were killed in Bethlehem, it says, then what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. A voice was heard in Ramah, wailing and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be consoled because they are no more. But you just told me that Jeremiah's words were about captivity of the Israelites, not about babies being murdered in Bethlehem. So which is it?
No, I said that Jeremiah was talking about the Babylonians and about what was written in Matthew, not about the Assyrians.
No, you didn't say that. Now you've just said that for the first time since I read Matthew,
No.
and you'd be wrong because he didn't say anything about babies being murdered in Bethlehem. He said your children will come back from the land of the enemy. Do you think the babies that were murdered in Bethlehem are coming back from the land of the enemy? Do you think they're returning to their own country?
There,
The answer is no, John. This is the moment where you could be a hero by being honest about what this says, rather than having to have us leave this conversation with you looking like a liar. We don't want you to appear like a liar on this live stream. We want you to be honest and to engage in honest dialogue with us. And honest dialogue would lead to you admitting that Matthew is using a passage completely devoid of its context.
When Jeremiah says they were not, what does that mean?
It means they were carried away. They existed no more. They were in the land of the enemy. Some of them died. Some of them came back.
It also meant that when Herod slaughtered the children, that they went out of existence.
Didn't mean anything about Herod's children. There's not a single word in Jeremiah 31 that would be about Herod. Yeah. Not a single one. He says that your children will come back from the land of the enemy. The passage is clearly about the Babylonians coming back from the land of the enemy. And thank you, John. You've demonstrated now that you might be in stage 4 of Christian brain rot syndrome. I hate this for you. I wish that you would get better. You cannot be honest, 15, and that's what makes these calls so painful, is because I bet in real life you're delightful. Not. I bet in real life we could sit down over bacon and eggs and have a great conversation. But your religion has poisoned your brain, and you're no longer capable of using critical thinking or being honest with somebody who disagrees with your position. And because of that, I think we have to move on to the next caller. But we appreciate you being here, John. And I think you owe Seth an apology for doing this to him, okay?
We'll meet again. Don't know
He'll
when.
Be back.
Don't know when. Is he a frequent caller? The chat seemed to know his argument before I heard his argument. Okay, if the last 29 minutes and 38 seconds have provided anything, it has provided a foundation for me to be able to ask a couple of questions to somebody who is much more in the know than I am on much of this stuff. Now, it was my understanding that in the Greek translation of the Hebrew for Christ would be born of a virgin, it was the word Alma, but I heard a different word come out of your mouth. So, I mean, it wasn't, Mary actually wasn't a virgin. She was the young woman of marriageable age, which was an extremely common thing. Am I tracking on that, Justin?
So yeah, there's an interesting thing that happens in the Hebrew Bible. It refers to her as an Alma. Ha is the definite article, so Ha Alma means the young woman, which means it's a known young woman. It's not a random young woman. And then the modifier hara comes after that in the Hebrew text, which just is an adjective for being pregnant. So it should be translated the pregnant young women or young woman. The Greek translation rather than using the strict word for virgin. It could have add some modifiers to it. It just used a parthenos, which sometimes was generic for virgin. Sometimes a parthenos could be a virgin. Sometimes it's not a virgin. In fact, in the story of Tamar in the Greek Septuagint, when Amnon is raped by Tamar, she's referred to later as a parthenos after she's been raped. We find the same thing in Genesis 34 with Dinah after she's been raped. She's referred to as a parthenos. And there's even one more occasion in the Greek Septuagint where there's someone who clearly is not a virgin and is referred to as a parthenos. But the problem is, when Matthew time period rolled around, they had a kind of smaller semantic range of parthenos. Kind of like today, like there used to be a time where we could use the word gay, and now it means something different. And we know that it means something different. But maybe 100 years from now, people might not know how the word translated over time. That's what happened to Matthew. Matthew didn't know that parthenos had a wider semantic range at one point. And so when he was reading it, he was only reading it through the lens of, here's what I know the word to mean today.
Now, if I can jump in, though, I mean, Matthew being written in the third person, not written by Matthew. What was the estimated writing date on that. It's like around 70 CE, something like that.
So that's a tough one because Mark is dated just after 70 CE, and that's the earliest. Luke and Matthew both quoted directly from Mark, so they had to come after Mark.
I see.
Whoever wrote those two gospels, which we don't really know, we're attributing those names to it. The earliest manuscript of Matthew, P1, doesn't have Matthew's name on it. We don't know exactly when they were written, but they had to post date Mark, so they got to be after 70.
I mean, it's not like we don't have and it's a terrible paper trail, but we don't have the paper trail like we had with Paul, the epistles of Paul, etc. Right? I mean, Paul wrote, was it 13 books of the New Testament, supposedly, and apparently there's more evidence for that. But Matthew's a big question mark to me. And then I'm stuck with the cheat sheet aspect of all prophecy. Because aren't we talking about people who are writing the New Testament who essentially have crib notes from all of the ages before, and then they can just fulfill prophecy at a whim? Am I tracking?
Yeah. So this is a really good argument, which is if you have a story that comes later that claims to fulfill these other prophecies, well, first of all, like, we don't know that this story is even true, which is the first problem. But you could just write in your own fulfillments. Like, I could write a story about a character that fulfilled all these prophecies. Like, anyone could do it.
Beyond that, by the way, I've got a professor who is an archaeologist and an expert on, I hate the words biblical archaeology, but archaeology that relates to biblical mythology. And they were exploring what is believed strongly by experts in the field to be King Herod's tomb. It was discovered like 15, 18 years ago. And so they were expounding, they were actually elaborating on what the real life of a King Herod was. And it's fascinating. So I'm going to release that conversation as we get a little closer to the time of the nativity story. But, it's funny because I think it was Matthew doesn't even mention Herod, and it's Luke. Either that or I'm inverting them. But one of the testaments like totally omits the execution of the firstborn by King Herod. And the other one,
Luke
it's a
does.
central part of the story. And I just find that's a pretty major omission for a book that's supposed to be totally congruous. Do you have any thoughts on Herod, Justin?
100%, because as you pointed out in Matthew, it's very important that Herod was on the throne and was killing the babies because that's what forced him into Egypt. So it says they remained in Egypt until the death of Herod, and we know Herod died in 4 BCE. But in Luke, that whole narrative's omitted. In fact, it says Jesus' birth was during the census of Quirinius, which is around 6 CE, which means there's at least a 10-year difference between Matthew and Luke in when they were born, because Luke didn't include any of the Herod bit. He had no idea that Herod was part of this nativity story, or else he wouldn't have put the birth during the census of the Syrian governor Quirinius.
Well, and as I understand it, the census required only male heads of household, and it happened in the cities of the residents, which meant Joseph wouldn't have had to travel, and he didn't have to drag poor Mary along in the story anyway. So the Quirinius census falls apart on that level as well.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, we know from ancient documentation that the censuses didn't work the way Luke described it. Like, you wouldn't have to travel back to your father's ancestral hometown to do a census. That's not how that works at all.
Finally, before we get to the next call, just because I'm still breathing, I'm still psychologically recovering from the slap fighting which was happening with John, between you and John, and you conducted yourself with such grace while I'm over here being a child, and I do apologize, but I tend to want to amuse myself, and so I'm over here, but I am listening. But I'm not familiar. I don't know much about this mistranslation of Emmanuel in Matthew chapter 1 in relation to Jesus. Now, we know that New Testament authors are like, hey, what'd be great is if we could fulfill prophecy here. But explain a little more about the mistake that is made when it comes to prophesying the birth of the Christ child using the name Emmanuel. Flesh that out more because I'm fascinated.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. Matthew is known for doing this. He's quoting it from the Greek quite often, but even Matthew will quote it from the Greek and then slightly tweak one or two words to make it sound more like it applies to Jesus. And one of the examples is in Matthew 1:23, where he quotes it and he says, "Look, the virgin shall become pregnant and give birth to a son, and they shall name him Emmanuel." But when you use they, you're kind of you can read it as thinking like, oh, all those who believe in Jesus will call him Emmanuel. That's kind of how it feels like it would read. But actually, if you read it in Greek and in Hebrew, in the Isaiah passage, it doesn't say that they shall call him Emmanuel. It refers to the specifically the parents naming him Emmanuel, which sounds a lot less like, well, other people will call him Emmanuel. So Matthew's always like tweaking the passages to make it just sound a little bit more like Jesus. You know what I mean?
Prophecy, too, I find is a weak apologetic. I don't know how many times I will engage with someone who is like, but what about all the fulfilled prophecies? And I remember talking to a Syriologist, Dr. Joshua Bowen, about the probably the most famous unfulfilled prophecy, arguably so, the one in, I want to say it's in Ezekiel 20 something, about the prophecy of Tyre, right? King
Yeah.
Nebuchadnezzar is going to go in, he's going to wipe out Tyre, and it's going to be so devastated that the only thing the place will be good for is for the fishermen to lay their nets on the rocks to dry them out in the sun. It will
Hmm.
be devastated, and you will remember it no more. Of course, then it's written about in the most printed book in history, which is a weird prophecy to make. But I'm like, well, Tyre was not destroyed. Like that prophecy
Mm.
totally falls apart, right?
Well, you're 100% correct. It's one of the oldest inhabited cities. And also, if you just fast forward to chapter 29, Yahweh admits that he didn't actually succeed against Tyre. It says that the king didn't get his reward from Tyre, therefore I'll be giving it to you from Egypt. So the apologist wants to come in and say, no, it actually was destroyed, which is a lie. But all you got to do is just read the rest of Ezekiel, and you're like, oh, no. Yeah, God got it wrong. It just didn't happen. He admitted that it didn't happen.
You just picture Yahweh's up there going, "Oh shit, that didn't work out," and it's just a weird behavior for an omnipotent deity, like who can do anything that he wants, who gives commands and provides edicts and does things that don't necessarily work out. But that takes me back to Genesis chapter 2 or Genesis chapter 3, right? The entire Bible, and I promise I'm done yammering in just a second,
No,
Justin.
you're
But
fine. You're
look at
fine.
I think shit that didn't work out should be a subtitle for the Christian Bible in all translations, because you think the master blueprinter, the master designer, the most intelligent entity being whatever in all the cosmos and beyond has come up with this plan, and immediately it goes wrong. Adam and Eve sin in the
Yeah.
garden. Oh, shit, that didn't work out. Well, everybody else sins. Oh, shit, that didn't work out. I'll drown everybody. Okay, now we got tribal wars throughout the Old Testament. Oh, shit, that didn't work out. Well, maybe I'll bring Jesus to save everybody else. Shit, right now in the year 2025, two-thirds of the planet worships either another God than, than God, Yahweh, Jesus, or no God at all, at least in terms of Christianity. And I just think, no, why are we not stopping to look up at the sky and go, hey, maybe managerial and planning is not your forte. Maybe you should be more of a support person and let somebody else do the thinking. That's just how my brain works, Justin.
Mm.
FYI.
I'm with you. Yahweh definitely kind of failed out of managerial school, and there's so many empty promises. One of my favorites is after the Babylonian invasion, God says he's going to bring people back to the land. He's going to bless them and elevate his people again. And then it says, just like the days of Noah to me, just as I swore that the waters of Noah would never again go over the earth, so I have sworn that I will not be angry with you, nor will I rebuke you. Oh, interesting. Because just a couple hundred years later, the Greeks came in and just decimated the Jews, and then the Romans. Like, is this God being not angry with you? I don't want to see the angry God if this is the one that's not angry at them.
Oh, it's like in the collective amnesia of the Israelites. So, the Israelites the golden calf or whatever they do, right? They commit some heinous sin in the eyes of God. And so God looks up and he's like, oh, come on. So he says, you have angered me. I shall smite thee. And then he slap fights them. Boom. Whether it's disease or swords or blood and pain or whatever. And they look up and go, this is horrible. Please stop smiting us. We're sorry. We won't do it again. And God's like, I will now stop smiting you. 5 minutes later, the Israelites start doing wrong shit again. and get themselves in trouble. And God's like, I am angry. I will now smite thee. And he slap fights them. And they're like, oh my God, look at the horrors all around us. We are so sorry. We will never do it again. Please stop smiting us. And God's like, I will now stop smiting you. And then another 5 ad nauseum throughout, especially the first 5 books of the Old Testament. The collective amnesia of the Israeli people, the Israelites, just boggles my mind, just blows me away. So
it is a fun. To be fair, as an atheist, these Bible stories are funny. They're fun to read. As a Christian, it hurts because you have to justify it. But we do have Jasmine in the queue. Mm-hmm.
Oh, go ahead. I was thinking, before you get to Jasmine, I was thinking I may have you on my channel in the month of December. We may have to talk more about like the nativity story, how much is supposedly drawn from the Old Testament, because I always like to get into, Matthew and Luke. And enough new people come by the channel to talk about, the fact that supposedly Jesus was the reason for the season. Don't call me, I know, but this is the narrative. We may have to have a conversation. I'll buzz you, and we'll figure that out for next month. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, sure thing. Love to have a chat on that. So Jasmine is a theist all the way from Canada. Not sure what type. Jasmine says, what skills acquired from an evangelical Christian background, characteristics left behind after conversion, do the hosts regret their evangelical backgrounds? Well, Jasmine, welcome to the line with Justin and Seth. It sounds like you're trying to ask us about our experience. Did we gather that correctly?
Yes, please.
Okay, sure. And you had some questions?
Well, yeah, just before I go into what I think evangelicals might have as a bonus from their backgrounds, just what you guys think of your backgrounds and what skills. Like both of you are excellent speakers in your own rights, although different kind of format, sort of type. But I am more interested in hearing you guys first.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm curious about the genesis of your question. Pardon the expression. Are you a believer in God? Are you a Christian? Or
I used to be a Christian. I've converted out. I'm a neophyte Buddhist.
Okay. So in your life, does an evangelical background bring you feelings of joy, regret? Are you thankful for them? Do you have thoughts about them? I'm curious about you.
I don't really come from an evangelical background specifically. I come from a mixed Christian background, but the primary Christian denomination in my area is Catholics. You can't escape the Catholics in my area. So there's
I love
quite
the
a bit
Catholic Church. An entire culture that encourages Bible illiteracy among its population. Like, come in, we'll do the incense, we'll read a couple of sort of, puffy sounding, very esoteric words from on high, and then you go off to your beer and bingo and maybe do confession to reset the Etch-a-Sketch, have a nice day. Like it literally, I think, is one of it's remarkable. I'm almost jealous. Like, no Bible study required. Just show up, genuflect, have a good week. So that's how I feel about Catholicism in many ways.
Oh, I find Catholicism very formatted. Like everything has to be precisely the way the lectures or the preaching has to be a precise way. The candles have to be a precise way. Everything has to be precise, right? It's
they make
strange,
the
but you always
Southern
know what you're getting
Baptist.
with Catholicism.
Yeah, Catholics make the Southern Baptist look like a frat party, and that's saying something. As far as I'm concerned, I took a long time to exit the faith. And part of that, a lot of it has to do with childhood indoctrination. The same people that taught me how to tie my shoes and how to ride a bike and taught me, to stay away from strangers and fed me and sheltered me and loved me and that I gave absolute trust to as a very young child. These were the same people that told me there was a Jesus in heaven and that the Bible was true Adam and Eve and Noah and all these other stories were real. And then they placed me throughout my upbringing in a reinforcement culture where everything affirmed what they had said. It was Christian friends, Christian music, Christian apparel, Christian school, Christian church, Christian everything, insulating me and isolating me from the outside world. On top of that, there was this threat. You know, you don't want to anger God. You don't want to go to hell, right? All of these reinforcers are in place. And so when I hear some atheists go hard at those who took a long time to bust out of the faith, I think they're missing it. Indoctrination, when you bake that stuff in, a lot of times it takes a long time to get there, to deconstruct. And when I finally decided to do my own thinking on this stuff, when I was in my 30s, and I realized there was no there, I beat myself up. How stupid could you be? Balaam argued with his donkey. His donkey spoke Hebrew. Seth, what's the matter with you? You know, I'm sorry, a guy built a boat housing the world's animals that floated for a year with, it's just how a woman, a young girl was conceived to save a super baby via ghost sex so that the offspring could be turned into a bloody meat pinata to save us from the hell that he created. I literally went back and thought, how did I believe this for so long? And I beat myself up for being so dumb and for wasting so much time. And it took me a few years to begin to give myself some grace and see the upside. And this is the answer to your question. I learned to give myself some grace for being human and for being indoctrinated. And then I gave myself credit for finally saying, fuck it, I'm going to figure this out. Whether it's true or not, whatever the consequences, whatever friends or family I lose, whether I get fired from my job, whatever happens in my life, I got to know. You know, I give myself credit for finally taking that step. On the other side of my religious faith, I have found that 30 years in Christianity has made me much more effective in speaking about not just the Bible and the verses and the dogmas and the mission statements and the churches and the denominations, but the culture at large, Christians at large. And sometimes that means even being more charitable. While some people will write off Christians as they're all this or they're all that, I'll say, you know what? I wasn't an idiot when I was a Christian. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't a Nazi. I wasn't hateful. I wasn't all these things. I was just brainwashed. I was a good person trying to do it right. And so my evangelical past has actually made me a better activist in my own life. So while I do have regrets, at the end of the day, it is what it is. And I've managed to take that bug and make it a feature. That's my long answer to the short question. Sorry, Justin. But that's what I got.
No, it's perfectly fine.
Thank you.
I mean, I've always felt like I've mostly agreed with Seth's position here. You know, I don't have any ill will towards my time as a Christian. And I certainly, the people that I met in the church, I still adore them. I think they're amazing people. The problem I have is I know that my church experience isn't identical to everybody else's. There's a lot of people that went through church and they were harassed. They were told that they had to hate themselves because they love somebody of the same sex, that they were told that they were created wrong and sinful and dirty and God hates them. That's why he has to light them on fire for all of eternity. I now, from my vantage point now, doing what I do, I know people, many people who have had horrible experiences in the church. So while I can certainly tell you that I'm grateful for going to Bible college and seminary and for my time in Christianity, it breaks my heart to know that the church has done so much evil, even if it didn't do evil to me.
Did you both come out of progressive branches of Christianity, or was it more conservative for you both?
Mixed for me.
I mean, Dad was ex-Lutheran, Mom was hardcore Pentecostal. I went to a Southern Baptist school. So I mean, we sort of had 31 flavors. We were Bible literalist. I mean, it was pretty conservative. It was Christian nationalist. There was an Adam and Eve and Noah's Ark and Esther and King Herod and, you know, all of the book of Revelation and the trumpet shall sound and hell was a real place. Depart from me, you who are cursed, into a lake of everlasting fire. And And we had our fire and brimstone sermons. And, I think Justin's right. One of the more tragic things is, well, people will often say, well, why can't you just let people believe what they want to believe? Why do you have to be such a pain in the ass about this stuff? And I always reply, well, if religion was benign and it didn't ripple out, it didn't become actionable, I wouldn't have as much of a problem. I mean, I think, is it true is a question that we should all be promoting and asking. I don't think it's our job to keep other people comfortable. I think if it's an nonsensical or wrong belief, it should be challenged whenever possible. But by design, someone's belief system will ripple out. It affects how they raise their kids, indoctrination. It affects how they operate in their culture. It affects how they vote, which explains the rise of Christian nationalism, Project 2025, the assault on democracy and decency, Zionism when it comes to foreign policy with Israel and Netanyahu's genocide in Palestine, informed so often by religious thinking. And so it is not a benign thing. It's not a happy, clappy, well, let people just believe what they want to believe, because it's never that simple. And I think it's important for us to come forward and say, yes, it is a community. Yes, it is an identity. Yes, there are lovely people who are religious. The dogma itself, the scriptures and the religion itself, those are fair game because so often they are a net negative. And I think the world would be better off without superstition.
Well, I think superstition just will crop up from time to time. Everybody has their lucky socks or whatever. But my thoughts go to my in-laws, who are very fundamentalist. They're actually Zionists and Southern Baptists, and I've been questioning sending my child to them, even though my son isn't Christian and I'm no longer Christian. Should I still respect tell them to attend their services?
Well, wait. What are you nervous about
How do you
happening?
approach?
Like if your child goes there and you're not there to supervise, what are you nervous about? What do you think might happen? What are your fears?
Well, like I said, they're both they're very Southern Baptisty fundamentalist Zionists, and the variety of Christianity you guys got down there is just it's so much different because it's so intertwined with politics and world affairs, whereas our variety of Christianity could be considered quaint, for lack of a better word.
But not with your parents, not if they're Zionists.
Well, no, this is the in-laws' parents, my son's grandparents.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I defer to Justin. What do you think, brother? I mean, when you've got family members in play who may have an agenda, and you've got a vulnerable kid in the mix, what are your thoughts?
Here's my impression. I think kids are smart. I spent a lot of years working with kids in ministry and whatnot. I think kids are way smarter than we give them credit for. Sometimes we think like if you tell a kid something, they're just automatically going to believe it. That's not always the truth. Sometimes they accept it only because they've never heard a counter argument for it, right? But if you've got a child who's like somebody's attempting to indoctrinate them in a religion, as long as you provide like adequate counterpoints to the indoctrination that they're learning, I mean, kids are smart. They usually go with what makes the most sense. And the reality is, when you live in a region that is, generally religious, like you're never going to be able to shield them from it, right? You have to let them experience it and just hope that you give them the tools they need to sort through the nonsense, hopefully sooner rather than later. It's kind of like you can never tell your child who to date. You can't date them. Like, I'm going to date them even harder because you don't want me to. So it's like you have to give your child a little bit of room to learn and think through things on their own. And I think if you do that, they'll end up on top eventually. That being said, I get it. I understand the fear, because like if you don't want them to be indoctrinated into something dangerous, you're like, oh my gosh, I need to shield them. But personally, I think kids are super smart. The best questions I ever got teaching the Bible came from kids. They're way more perceptive, way more critical than most adults. And if you provide them with the information they need, I think they typically come out to the most logical conclusions. sometimes, not all the time.
Justin, do you feel like that one of her fears is as much or more than a dogma issue, a boundary violation? Like, what happens if
Oh,
somebody on the family tree says, "Oh, we're blood relatives. Heaven and hell are in the balance." Hey, you know what? Now that mom's not around, let me tell you, whoa, you sure want to accept Jesus because, I mean, I've gotten emails from people who like my parents are trying to brainwash my kid when I'm not around, and they sneaking them off the church. I mean, I when I hear that, I wonder about a boundary violation aspect to the problem.
that's such a fair aspect of it, because if you lay down ground rules for your children or those that are in your care, and people are continually violating those ground rules, then certainly that means that they're violating your trust. They're violating the relationship that you have with somebody, right? And certainly I would call into question if they were violating those boundaries, whether or not they're even good actors and should be trusted in the first place. I really get that, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure I know immediately what I would respond to it with. You know what I mean? I've not been placed in that situation yet.
Well, how about, like, I know, Justin, you have at least one child. I don't know, Seth, if you do, but would you teach Christianity of any form to your children?
I wouldn't, and I'm in an interesting position where I'm not sure it would matter. My son is very high on the autism spectrum, and I don't think the abstract concepts of religion are really going to be a problem for him down the road. And if he does have a developmental arc, like he moves lower down on the autism spectrum, typically people that are on the spectrum are like really good at hyper focusing on logical ends. So like that's not the type of personality I might be worried about. But the caveat is sometimes people who get really good at hyper focusing on things, they end up getting it. They're the most dangerous aspects of the religion they fall into, because then they can't separate. Like if this thing is true, then by logical extension, there's like the limits become pretty crazy what they'll adhere to. That's why you get like people who are willing to unalive their children because they think God told them to. And, so I don't know. It's a tough one. And I don't worry about it specifically for my child, but I certainly could understand why generally that would be a concern.
I think if it was me, I would teach them teach them the tenets of all the world's major religions, right? I mean, I was taught one, and then I was taught to dismiss, mock, or fear all the others. I didn't know anything about them, right? I knew evolution was crazy. I'd never read Darwin's On the Origin of Species. I'd never gone to an actual evolution class. My science classes were theology classes inside a Christian school, right? So, I mean, the isolation factor where you teach one thing is the problem. But I get a lot of correspondence from people, and they were like, well, I was raised in a fundy household. Then I went off to college, and I took my first comparative religions class. And they were like, all right, here's Christianity, and here's its deity, and here's its dogma, and here's its holy book, and here's its paradise, and here's its pain, and all of its tenets. And then they go to Islam, and then they go to Hinduism, and then they go to Jainism, and then they go somewhere else, right? And people have an epiphany, and they're like, wow, wait a minute. Forgive if you saw me with Forrest the other day, I made the same analogy, but it's almost like going to a Mexican restaurant. You're like, I would like a taco. What's on a taco? You got a tortilla, meat, lettuce, cheese, tomato. Okay, well, that's fine. I'll take a tostada instead. What's on that? We got a tortilla, meat, lettuce, cheese, tomato. Okay, well, I'm going to go get some nachos. What's in that? Well, you got tortillas, meat, lettuce, cheese, and tomato. You just have taken the ingredients and assembled them in a different way. And I think when you see the religions that are you present them side by side in the context of, well, where do they come from? And do we know? And what was borrowed? And then blah, blah, blah. I think the light bulb of epiphany comes a lot faster, and people really begin to say, hey, wait a minute. Dr. John Loftus, he's not a doctor actually, but he's an educated man and a seminary graduate. John Loftus wrote the book called The Outsider Test for Faith, where you start to use critical thinking skills about your own faith and the way that you use them about others. And you go back and you just sort of examine everything. I would teach my kid Here's what the world religions, at least the major ones, say and believe, just to sort of inoculate them and educate them about how all this works. And then I think if they were properly taught how to think, they will connect those dots in a way that reveals, yes, they are all man-made and they are all mythology. That's my imperfect answer to your question.
Um, well,
I put you out
again,
into
it
sleep.
kind of
Sorry.
your stuff kind of reminded me of my time in college. It was actually the time I was most religious. Oddly enough, I didn't study Bible. I studied biology, and biology didn't shake my at the time my faith, and especially because again the area around the Catholics kind of have a fundamental a hand in developing the theory of evolution, but um, college did not shake my faith at all at the time. The only thing that seems to be left behind for me is kind of this divine command theory I can't shake.
Wait, you're not a Christian, but you hold to divine command theory?
Yeah, I know it's odd. Like, I keep thinking about it. If God said to, well, yeet baby off a cliff, if I was convinced I wasn't crazy and that was God, instant obedience, without question.
How do you know that God's not testing you to see if you do the right thing?
Oh God, I wouldn't know. But like I said, I still can't shake
That's
it
the
that
problem.
religion requires obedience regardless if there's a God concept or not.
But how do you know that God should be followed? How do you know he's even good? What if he's just a cosmic dictator and wants to see babies yeeted off cliffs?
You don't, but is it just a case of might versus might makes right? It doesn't matter if it's good, neutral, or evil. It's a
Right,
god or a goddess or whatever. So yeet baby.
but what we're suggesting, at least what I'm suggesting, is maybe might doesn't make right. Can something that is more powerful than everything else just be a cosmic asshole? How do you know that the God you believe in is actually good rather than assuming it's good?
Um, yeah, that's the question, but the question
Right?
it's still like why can't I shake that? Like this obedience thing, just
Because
do it.
it's
Even in Buddhism,
it's
there's a thing where it doesn't matter if you understand the practices; you just do the practices till you get it and become enlightened. So there's this obedience that doesn't seem to be shaken.
because it's been programmed into you. It's
Just
part
do it.
of your yeah, right? But that's why we're here. We're here to look at that and say, listen, this is programming, and we can deprogram it. You don't have to do this anymore. The logical extent of divine command theory can lead to tragic things, as we brought up earlier. It could bring you to the point where you're executing your own children. But I can push it further. And I'm not gonna. I certainly don't want to cook you on this because you're such a nice person. But I do this example quite often. Anyone watching from my channel knows what I'm gonna say. You've already said that if God told you to yeet a baby off a cliff, you think it would be right to yeet the baby off the cliff. So if God said, I need you to, I don't know, yeet an entire orphanage off the cliff, would it be right to yeet the orphanage off the cliff?
Then that's getting harder. Obviously, the more you up the stakes, the harder it is to
Right.
push.
But in divine command theory, there is no limit. You can't draw the line between one baby being yeeted and a whole orphanage being yeeted. That line is being drawn by your own internal subjective thinking, not by God. So now it's catch-22. You have to decide, is God's divine command theory correct, Or am I actually deciding what is the limit of right and wrong? And the reality is, most of us do it ourselves. We just attribute it to God. So if you do truly believe in divine command theory, that means if God tells you to yeet the entire orphanage, you have to yeet the entire orphanage, correct?
Yeah.
Right. And if God says,
Without
after
question,
you
too.
without question, right? And after you yeet the entire orphanage off the cliff, I want you to scrape up what's left of the babies and turn them into meat patties and have them for lunch. The right thing to do is to have the baby meat patties, isn't it?
Again, this
That's right.
strange.
Because there's no limit. Don't worry, I'm not going to force it out of you, Jasmine. You're nice. But you and I both know the answer to the question. With divine command theory, there is no limit. That's the problem with divine command theory. There's nothing you could not justify once you go to divine command theory. But the reality is, as we're going through these steps, your brain is slowly starting to recognize, well, some of this feels more wrong than others, right? But that's you. That's your own internal dialogue trying to figure out where the line of right and wrong is. And that's where I would step in and say, yeah, human beings are probably better at deciding like where that line is, even though we've really fucked it up in the past. But if divine command theory is true, we really don't have a line at all. There is no line at all, none. Right. But Seth, what's your take?
I'm first of all, to hear the word yeet in the middle of such a sobering conversation about throwing, like I just picture the Spartans, when they took the imperfect children up to them and threw them, they're like yeet and threw them off. It's just such an odd conflict of language in my head. But okay, the verb totally works. I myself am troubled. I'm not coming after you, Jasmine, but I heard what I heard, and this may not be what you said. What I heard was, if you heard a voice in your head tell you to kill your kid, you would do it. Tell me I heard that wrong?
Not well. Kill my kid. That's a whole other ball of wax. But
No. You throw
I
the
also
child
think
off the cliff. That child dies. You have killed the child. That's fair, isn't it?
yes, of course.
Okay, well, can you see how that would be an alarming thing for me and for Justin and for the people in our viewing audience to hear? I don't, in my mind, believe you would ever harm your child. I don't think. I think what you're going through is probably more of a cerebral exercise, and so you're working it out. If you had a divine command and there's baggage there and whatnot, I really think you would be. We always talk about what Abraham was ordered to execute Isaac as an act of obedience. And I think you would do what Christopher Hitchens said he would do. I think you would tell God, fuck off. Like hell no, I would never harm my child. And I'm convinced in my mind that you would do that. And I don't think I'm being too generous, right? I mean, you would give anything and everything to protect your kid, right, Jasmine?
Yeah, I mean, it is obviously it is a cerebral exercise, but
But why the pause?
I
Why
don't
the
know.
asterisk? Because I think when the chips are down, what? Where would Justin's right? If the edict came down from on high, and let's say it was some sort of a cosmic other deity, wizard, father, God, said, kill your kid as an act of obedience, that deity has then revealed itself to be a deity not worth obeying. You want me to murder my kid? Hell no. Fuck off. Right? We know that that is not a deity that would be worthy of our allegiance, obedience, or worship. So we can make that moral decision in our minds and we can do what we think is the moral thing to do. And I believe you would do that in a pinch. I certainly do hope so, but your pause concerns me a little bit, Jasmine.
Well, again, maybe this is how deep the Abrahamic, because they call it the Abrahamic religions, how deep the thinking or the training or whatever you want to call it goes. Yeah, because everything is based off that Abrahamic, you sack your kid kind of thing.
It's written down. Fine. It's mythology, much of it borrowed, all of it anonymously written about a deity that commanded one of his own children to kill one of his own children. So that and $5, morally, that and $5 will get you a cup of coffee at Starbucks. You know, you have an evolved ethical center. You know that the murder of a child is wrong. And I would be horrified to think that your child would ever hear this conversation and notice the pause in your answer when what that child needs is every assurance that, hell no, I will do nothing but protect my kid, because it's the moral thing to do. I wouldn't worry about what some unproven or disproven cosmic other has to say about it. You don't need that, right? You've got everything you need to make the moral choice right here and right here. So own it, enjoy it, participate in it, celebrate it. It belongs to you.
Oh, okay. I think that's all my questions. It was interesting exploring morality, especially since you guys came from a Christian background. Thank you.
Well, thanks for calling in, Jasmine. I realize that towards the end of the conversation, we touched on some very difficult topics, but we're not doing it to beat up on you. I genuinely just want you to be able to think through some of the illogical extents of your position, because I think Seth and I both agree. You seem like a caring individual who's truly looking for what is true and right, and we hope that you're in a good position and moving towards even better position. Oh, I think she dropped. But
Yep. Thank you,
you know what?
Jasmine.
It hurts me to hear what sounds like very kind, nice people admit that they would do horrific acts for God.
You know, I have more questions for you, Justin, before we get to Eric on the switchboard, if you'll indulge me. All right. You and
For
I could probably
sure.
sit down over dinner and just go. Okay.
Yeah.
Predict
While
this.
Seth and I are vamping a little bit, if you want to call in, the number is 720-619-2288. We'd love to talk about your God/religion/whatever. Go ahead and call in. We'll get to you momentarily. Sorry about that, Seth.
No. I threw this question out and I said to my listeners, I said, look, I want you to do me a favor. I'm just curious, totally unscientific, but I want you to go and talk to the fundamentalist in your life and ask him this question. If God came to you the way he came to Abraham and he said, I want you to kill your child as an act of obedience. I want you to offer up your child as a sacrifice the way Abraham was going to offer up Isaac. Would you do it? Just to see, right? To see how these people were really thinking. And then they forward me a bunch of the responses. And the vast majority were, hell no, I'll never hurt my kid. No, I'd rather receive punishment from God, which is what we'd expect. But there were a few. And they said, well, if God commanded it, I mean, it's his party, his rules, I mean, I'm not going to disobey God. Those were terrifying to me.
Yeah.
And I think divine command theory explains much of what we're seeing today in our political culture. There is an entire sect, PRRI, Dr. Robert Jones's outfit and others have examined how divine command theory has impacted the culture that has supported the authoritarianism that is surging in this country. And much of that narrative has to do with, well, we need somebody who is willing to come down and break man's rules to superimpose God's rule, right? Why would you obey corrupt laws, maybe even a corrupt constitution, God's law, be it the 10 Commandments or some subjectively meted out, sermonized directive from on high? That is what the law should be. And then they could ignore everything else. They can ignore the courts. They could ignore anything. And, divine command theory in that way is terrifying to me because it allows people, ostensibly allows them to simply write off societal structure, norms, laws, policies, in any of those things, just to say, well, if God wills it, God's will be done, and no further thinking, including moral reasoning, is required. Divine command theory is terrifying to me. I don't know. Am I overthinking it, Justin? Is that too
No,
much?
I'm 100% on board with you. And I started my arc against divine command theory started back when I was in seminary and I was studying the medieval and late medieval period. And I was watching all of the edicts come out from the Pope and from the Catholic Church, and then their petty rulers about, well, these are the horrible actions you have to take because God wills it. In fact, even Martin Luther famously wrote a whole book on the Jews and their lies, where he advocated for burning down their synagogues and confiscating all of their property and chasing them out of the land. And we have edicts elsewhere where they were from even as early as Constantine forcefully baptizing Jewish people who refused to convert. The minute you say God wills it, the government could put anything behind God wills it. And what can you do? You can't do anything about it. There's a whole group of people. Have you ever heard of the Waldensians?
No.
There's hundreds of thousands of them. You don't know about them because they were all murdered. They were murdered by the Catholic Church because they were baptizing adults rather than warranting infant baptism. They were the precursor to the Anabaptists, and the Catholic Church said, no, we ain't doing that. If you find them, murder them. If somebody in your ranks knows where one is and they don't give them up, you're murdered too. So, like, divine command theory is the most terrifying thing you could ever want, because eventually it pervades to a point where the government can utilize it as their tool to hammer whatever they want to hammer, and it never turns out well. We don't have a good history with it.
I did some writing a few years ago about the Catholic Church and papal infallibility, and how the church that continues to have to update its records and doctrines and fix things is somehow, especially the Pope, right? The papal infallibility. And I'm like, throughout history, how many times has the church said, whoops, well, we didn't really mean that. I mean, yeah, the Pope's infallible, but, whether it's the palling around with the Nazis and or whether it coming extremely late to the party on the science of evolution. I know when Pope Francis was coming forward and saying more egalitarian things about gay people and divorcees, et cetera. And of course, all the bishops are like, shit. They all go back and do a back room and try to figure that out. Papal infallibility seems kind of flawed to me, Justin.
Right. Yeah, it certainly does. And you know what the apologetic is? Well, it's only infallible if it's an official promulgation from the Pope. Otherwise, he's fallible. Okay, that's a nice little carve out.
He's fallible until he's not. Whatever. We'll decide at a meeting. So this is related. I know in India, and she was talking about throwing the baby off of the cliff, which is an alarming visual. But I believe this is still going on in parts of India, parts of Spain, and elsewhere, where there is an actual process or a tradition, a ritual called baby tossing. And so when a child is born, apparently somebody somewhere said, you know what? If we want this child to be blessed in its life, in the eyes of God and man, what we need to do is we need to haul its ass up 5 to 10 stories to the roof of a building. Then we take people down at the bottom and we have them hold out a large bed sheet like a net. And then we take the poor baby, we throw the baby off the roof, and it lands in the sheet. And somehow that is supposed to be a blessing to the child for the rest of its life. You can imagine the horrors that happen, whether people, they don't hold on to the sheet, it slips out, they have broken or dislocated. I mean, it's just horrifying. And, I mentioned Hitch earlier, but he would probably say something like, under what other auspices would this be even remotely conceived, if not religion or tradition, right? It just blows your mind.
It's baffling to me. And it's funny because if you grew up in it, this is normal. If you don't grow up within it, well, it seems barbaric. The religion that you don't grow up with always seems stupid. The religion you do grow up with always seems to be the most sensible. But man, I'll tell you one thing. If somebody threw my baby, even if it was towards a sheet, there'd be some problems.
If someone, would that be yeeting? Would you yeet the baby? It would be yeeting the baby off of the roof. And there's all kinds of crazy, weird ass, often harmful traditions that superstition drives. And you think, wouldn't we as a species, wouldn't it be a net positive if we could just get rid of all that, root ourselves in the real world on terra firma, and begin acting in more reasonable ways? And so why can't you leave religion alone? We come back to that question. I'm like, well, people like to say it makes people happy and it does a lot of good. It creates community. It alleviates the fear of death. All those things may be true. But I think, is it true remains the number one question. And two, how much more harm does it do than good? And do we really need it? All the best stuff religion does anyway that humans can do without it. I mean, I would agree. Do you think, is there anything religion brings to people that a non-religious life could not provide? Or am I missing something?
Yeah. Not anything unique. Everything that people believe that Christianity brought to us, half that came with the Christians kicking and fighting against it, but also some of the stuff that would be like not uniquely Christian, but specifically Christian, would say like charity. Well, we have that in countries that have no religion. Buddhism does charity. So like we have no reason to believe that the religion is necessary for anything, even if there are some components that we like about it, because we can get the components without the religion. It's like, yes, if you brought me a dish that had an amazing dessert on it, but I had to eat the main dish, which was full of cyanide, to get to the dessert. Listen, I'm just not going to eat it. I don't need it. That's not a thing. So that's kind of how I view the religion. Can it bring good things? Sure. I think it can. Can it also bring atrocities? Yep. I don't think we need to cave into the atrocities to get the good part.
Some smart ass in the chat was asking what the thread count was on the sheet that catches the falling baby. And I thought, come on. And then my next thought was, that's a good question. Right? You want a good thread count for safety reasons. Maybe at least 300. At least 300. That's my vote. Preferably
I agree.
6. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. Well, listen, we've got another theist and maybe another one in screening coming in. Friends, we're going to get to our next call. Before we do that, make sure and remember, we're going to be live all week. Monday night, we've got Skeptalk with Forrest and Erica, a dynamic duo. Wednesday night, Alyssa and Taylor are going to be on Chewed Gum. Of course, Matt is going to be on Wednesday night with Will Judy. And Transatlantic on Thursday is going to be Luxander and Josie. And we're probably going to have more, probably Cus I Wanna over the weekend. So make sure you're tuning in, not just to the Sunday shows, but all the shows. And of course, After Dark later tonight. And with that, we've got Eric with us. Eric is a theist. Doesn't say Eric's a Christian, but says Eric is a theist and wants to talk about the utility of debating the morality of God with theists. Do hosts think it will have a hand in deconstructing somebody? Why should caller care about the morality of God if God doesn't exist? It's an interesting question, Eric. You're on the line with Justin and Seth. The question in the chat.
I see atheist, not theist. Am I reading that wrong?
Oh, no. That was me. I read it wrong.
Okay.
It was atheist.
Good clarification. Sorry about that.
All good.
So what's the question, Eric? Is it, do you think there's utility in debating theists about their God's morals?
Actually, kind of the opposite. I was wondering, what would be the utility? Because, wouldn't we have to believe this God exists first to even care about his morality if we're going to debate it with people?
Do you think Voldemort's an evil character?
Oh, yes.
Oh, is he real?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm just saying in terms of I guess in terms of trying to deconstruct somebody.
Well, I can tell you why I do it. I don't know if Seth has the same answer. I'd love to hear his, but the reason why I bring up the moral debate is because I think most people have a built-in intuition about morals that are kind of founded on our upbringing, our environment, and maybe some biological factors from evolution. And so when you show them what the God of their religion is really like, some of them will shudder. And I can remember when it first happened to me, I was probably 21. I was reading through all of the laws of Moses specifically, because it was one of those areas of the Bible that I was really weak in. I was reading the laws of Moses, and I remember I came on two different passages that were really difficult for me. One was Exodus 21 and Leviticus 25 about the slavery, and then also all the passages where women were treated as property. Very fucking difficult for me. It was hard for me as a human being with four sisters and a mother to read the laws of Moses and see God treating women like property when I know that they're not property, right? So sometimes it's not universal. Sometimes you can take a Christian, show them in the Bible what it really says, and some of them, maybe not a lot of them, some of them will at least pause and be like, am I worshiping a monster? And I think that's important. What do you think, Seth?
Well, yeah, I do. I don't have a lot of, actually, I rarely have any luck going in and trying to debate is not a good word, but to discuss the morality of the Christian faith, especially in relation to the Bible, with people who are already in a defensive posture. Because many do operate with a divine command theory thing. Well, it's God's ant farm. If he wants to take a magnifying glass and torch the ants, I mean, it's his call. Or it's context. Well, there was slavery in the Old Testament because God had to condescend to the culture that he was working with. Or, the disobedient children had to be stoned because those were the laws of the land. I mean, they have an excuse for anything. Or they write off the Old Testament and say, I'm a new covenant person. I'm happy, clappy Jesus person. They're all these sort of excuses. And I don't have a lot of luck with that. But the tactic that I do use when it comes to morality is if I hear someone who happens to be holding court about those who don't believe in the Christian God, and they don't know how to love. They don't know right from wrong. They don't know murder's wrong. They can't love their country. They're traitors to this country. God bless America. Those types of things. There have been a couple of times this has happened. And I let him go on for a little bit, and then I waited for a natural pause in the conversation, and I said, if I may, I said, I'm a non-Christian. I'm a non-religious person, a non-theist. I try not to use the word atheist if possible in that context. Because I'm working toward a point. And I'll say, when you say that that person can't know right from wrong, you're talking about me and people like me. When you say we don't know how to love, well, you're saying that I can't love Natalie. I can't love my friends. I can't love my country properly. When you say those things, you're saying them about me and people like me. When you say that, hey, the non-believer is going to burn forever and scream and writhe because they've got it coming, you're talking about me and people like me. And what happens on both occasions that I'm thinking of is they were stunned. Because I think for the first time, they were confronted with a three-dimensional humanity that was within feet of their physical presence. And they already knew me. And they knew that I was a moral guy whose life was filled with joy and purpose, who loved his wife and loved his friends and loved life and all those types of things. And I'd messed up their categories. I'd messed up the narrative in their head. And I found that the use of the word I in that way, not saying, well, let me give you the counter apologetic, but to say, just understand when you're saying those things, you're saying them about me. You are diminishing and even dehumanizing me. That has been an interesting starting point because it helps to sort of create a moment of pause where they don't feel attacked. And with one of those people, we actually had a further conversation on the phone a few weeks later where we got into a deeper conversation about the morality of the Bible and how someone who is not religious can have an evolved ethical system. And this person said, and this is a near quote, he said, you know what? He said, the truth is you're a better Christian than most of the Christians I know. And I didn't get pedantic about it, because we can better Christian. I didn't go there. I took it for the spirit in which it was intended. He was saying, you're one of the best people I know. And I recognize that you're not a Christian, but in my mind, you're one of the better Christians I know. Like, it was his way of trying to concede a little bit of ground. So I think it's a long game. But walking in with debate points, bullet points, I haven't had any success with. In fact, I find often they dig in and double down. So I don't have a magic bullet on it, man.
Eric?
Did we lose him?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, there he is. So, I mean, Eric, any thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I listen to the show a lot, and like I love the show, but I hear y'all thinking. Sometimes I just hear y'all debating about the morality of God, and I just like thinking to myself, who cares? Prove to me he exists first, you know. But
Well,
I totally
I think
understand.
we had a version.
Like I agree with everything y'all
We
said.
have
Like why it would like deconstruct somebody. But
didn't we have a version of that conversation with John? John's leaning into the Old Testament, and we were trying to dismantle him, I think, on two different levels. Justin was doing a fantastic job of saying, okay, well, here's essentially what the narrative of the story actually says. And I was saying, can you even tell me what the authorship angle is? And both, I think, have utility when it comes to refuting. So, I mean, we can debunk the morality of the Bible to discredit the witness. I think that's a fair tactic.
yeah.
So to me, I think the moral argument is an argument that goes against the existence of the triomni God that Christians so often think that they believe in, because you can use the moral argument to demonstrate that the omnibenevolence character is silly. It doesn't seem to exist, right? So it's just one kind of tool in the tool belt. And to be fair, I don't bring it up typically unless guests do. A lot of guests come in with C.S. Lewis talking points about how God must exist because morals exist objectively. And then I could just cook them on what the Bible actually says about morals. I don't typically bring out the moral argument and say, well, because of this in the Bible, your God doesn't exist. That's usually not how that works. It's not a great thing. On my live stream, I typically point towards the same thing you're suggesting, which is, well, God doesn't actually exist. And in order for you to have like some sort of standing in the moral argument, you would have to demonstrate that your God exists first. And of course, they can't do it. But, you know, it is what it is. You know, when you bring on guests, you're kind of at some point not at their mercy to debate the topics that they come in with, but I think it brings a better show. Because, you know, a lot of people will come in with talking points like the C.S. Lewis moral talking points. And people, we've all heard it. I know Seth has. I know everybody else in the community has heard these talking points on objective morality. So it's good for us to engage in some of these bad talking points to show the audience how they fail, you know?
Right. Totally agree.
Yeah. Because a lot of it's education for the audience. It's not like I'm not under no illusion that the people up here debating against me or anyone else, they're going to hang up the phone and be like, oh shit, I guess I'm an atheist now. That's really not the case. Most of the people watching are the intended audience, you know?
It's almost two people on the debate stage, right? Let's say people bought a ticket for an in-house debate in an auditorium. You never see one interlocutor look at the other and say, you know what, Bob, you're absolutely right. And he totally changes his position and they go off and, and they have tacos together. It's really more for the presentation of ideas so that those in the audience can be sponging up those, the claims and refutations, the data, the information or lack of from a position of safety. It's a chance for them to be able to sort of consider the points being presented. And so while we might have one caller on the phone, we'll have tens of thousands of people who are actually sort of sponging all this stuff up from their vantage, and maybe the arguments are something that spur thought. Maybe they can disagree and go improve the argument. Maybe it buttresses them and supports them as they go out and engage interlocutors in their own life. Debate does have its function, I think, in this culture. Eric's pregnant pauses are giving me real pause.
I'm still here.
On
I thought you were kind of talking back and forth.
No. I tend to go off. I'm very verbose. I tend to just bloviate, so it's probably my fault. Anything else, Eric, before we move on?
I think y'all pretty much nailed it, guys. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're very kind.
Okay. Thanks for calling in, Eric. Best of luck to you.
No problem. Have a good one.
You know
Cheers.
what, Justin? When you're engaging someone, I mean, you ever have someone just treat you like, "Why do you hate God?" You ever get that? Like, well, like you
I
just
hear it
want
a
to sin.
lot.
You just want to sin, Justin. You just want to get carnal. You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah. It's wild because it's almost like they think that you have to be an atheist to sin. I don't know if you know this. The whole Christian religion is built on you can do all the sinning you want. God will forgive you.
Yeah. Well, all you have to do is spend 10 minutes. I am releasing a conversation with a guy named Scott Latta. This is going to happen in 2 weeks. December the 3rd, I think, is when the video and the audio drop. And he's a former devout Christian, but he spent a couple of years investigating the American megachurch. And so he went out and he was getting into what are, in many cases, pretty high control cultures. And we were talking about like the more and more you see these moralists from the stage sitting under the hot lights and the fog machines and, you know, behind the worship team and all that stuff, the more you think, I'm going to wait about 6 months and see if they're involved in a scandal involving some moral failing, which very often means they were doing somebody they weren't supposed to be doing. You know, if you're Ted Haggard, the mega church pastor out of Colorado, you're doing meth while you're doing somebody you're not supposed to be doing. You know, you're right. I mean, if you want sin, just look in the church, man. They got, they're selling it wholesale from the platforms and the pulpits in the Christian church.
It's all over the place. All you got to do is cry a little bit and say that you've repented and you're done. You're good to go. You're fine. Jesus loves you.
I've sinned against thee and I've sinned against man. The tears begin to flow. They go, you ever see the old videos? I think it was in the 80s when Jimmy Swaggart, he recently died. And I think it may have been a net gain for humanity. I hate to say that out loud, but I mean, what did he really bring to the table? But, you know, Jimmy Swaggart, I mean, how many prostitutes did they catch that guy with? So he's moralizing on stage, and then they catch him. And I think in a hotel room or something. And he comes forward and he starts to cry, "Oh, I've sinned against thee." And Scott Ladd and I spoke about this as well. The church has a terrifying lack of transparency, and they have a good old boy model for restoration. And I'm using that word extremely loosely. So somebody comes forward and they've abused their position. There's a power dynamic in place. They have molested. I mean, we've seen people who've molested underage people, children. We've seen people who have used their power to pressure staff members and congregants into inappropriate relationships and situations, blah, blah, blah. So it comes forward, right? They're exposed. The white hot light of scrutiny is on them. And they do the same thing. Mea culpa, I'm so sorry. I have sinned before God and man. And then they take time off and they are accountable to a group of, I don't know, directors, deacons, whatever, who may happen to be their own buddies. And after a few months, maybe a year, off in the weeds, supposedly reconnecting with, you know, God, etc., they come back and they get a total pass. And I think, you know, the church has a pretty convenient model for some pretty awful and immoral behavior. So this idea that, you know, the atheist is the immoral one, I think is hugely reductive and often just flat out wrong.
Agreed. And isn't it weird how often these pastors seem to get forgiven by God with an accompanying NDA that they had to pay some money for? It's just weird how that happens.
Or you know, the pastors get freaking shipped off to a different church. You know, one church falls, who was it? Mark Driscoll at Mars Hill, one of the biggest churches in Seattle, one of the biggest churches in the country. And all of a sudden everyone's coming forward and they're like, this guy is abusive and he's shitty to people and it's a cult of personality and he's an asshole and all this stuff. And finally he's kind of forced out. The whole freaking church folds. And then he moves down, I think, to Phoenix or Scottsdale, and he starts a whole new church that is about to become, if not already is, a mega church. So the guy can be shitty to people and he gets a quick slap on the knuckles and then he just goes and resets somewhere else. It's almost like in the Catholic faith where they take the abusive priest and they just move them from one parish to another. It's really pretty terrifying.
It's the same thing. Same thing. And you're right, it is terrifying. Well, we've got a couple of people waiting in queue. I think Roger is next, a theist from Canada. So this is going to be an interesting take because Roger doesn't appear to be a Christian, appears to be of his own persuasion. So I'm curious to see where the conversation go. Roger, are you saying that God is real, but the pantheistic God says you believe in pantheism, not the Spinoza sense, however, and your argument is that we are eternal consciousness. So like maybe a collective consciousness, you're saying?
Yes. I mean, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear
Hello?
you.
All right.
So can I ask you a question?
And, yeah.
I'm somewhat familiar with pantheism, but the question I always have is, how did you come to the conclusion that pantheism is true?
Well, I like to think that everything is part of a superset that contains everything. And I know that there's a joke here about the monad, but really, to me, the joke is not seeing that this superset that contains everything is obvious. It exists. You can see it from an purely atheistic, physical perspective.
So
it's called
I just want to make sure
universe.
I'm hearing you correctly.
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt you. I apologize, but the evidence or the logical argument that it's true is that you kind of sense it, like you intuit it.
Well, originally I was atheist from a very, very young age. I accepted that reality, but I couldn't gut it, because of I think it was because of my personal life circumstances. If those circumstances would have been different, maybe I would have just went with it. But I also couldn't just believe on a fantasy story like Christianity or something like this.
Mm-hmm. We're with you, but I'm asking you about the pantheism, right? So you ended on pantheism, and that's fine.
Yeah, and
I guess what I'm trying to figure out is what if you came to me, we'll do like a Mad Libs, right? The Mad Lib starts, pantheism is true because of blank. Awesome. What do you put in the blank?
Pantheism is true because, I don't know if this answers it, but it was the most logical conclusion I came to from analyzing the nature of reality and the interconnectedness of things. And
that's not an argument.
Deeply the emergence of consciousness and asking myself, yeah.
All right, so you're saying it's true because it makes sense to me, and that's fine, but we need the steps. What makes it make sense? Because it might not make sense to others, right? So what are the logical steps or the evidentiary steps that leads one to conclude that it does make sense? Like maybe you can lay out your arguments or the evidences to Seth and I might be like, fuck, I guess we're pantheists now. Still with us?
Callers using the web client, that could be an issue.
Okay.
The people in the chat are referencing what he had referenced. The monad. Is this the guy who was speaking to Forrest and Erica on a show several weeks ago or several months ago about something called them? Is this the actual? Because I feel like if that's the case, I may be speaking to a celebrity, because the monad has become something that the monad has become almost part of our.
This is not the original monad guy, but to the caller, pull your phone away from your face and tap it. If the screen goes dark, we're going to lose your audio. So I need you to tap your phone to wake it up and then put it back on.
Also, when you're doing so, if you say the words wakey, wakey, that does tend to boost you sooner into the. No. Okay.
Well, listen, while Roger's figuring out how his phone works, the number to call in is 720-619-2288. There's a web link in the description of the video. Hey, Seth and I would love to talk to you. And I speak for myself, at least. I do love a unique argument. If you've got a unique perspective for God, listen, I'm tired of hearing fine tuning. I'm tired of hearing look at the trees. If you've got something unique, I'm really intrigued. I would probably fast forward you to the beginning of the call queue if you got one.
I don't have a lot of use for it. The universe is everything, and everything is the universe. It's all a little Deepak Chopra-y to me. It's the jello that cannot be nailed to the wall. I mean, it's not that I'm opposed to having that conversation, but I mean, there's almost, it's so freaking broad, and yet it's so freaking narrow, and it's so nebulous. I don't even know where to take those conversations. I'm not good at the universe is everything and everything is that. Yeah, I don't even know what to do with that. So I tend to wink out, man.
And it's kind of weird too, because typically, like, a lot of people who believe in pantheism do, like, some of them, not all of them, some of them do believe that there was like a creation event. But so if God is everything, then that means that he created himself or herself or itself, which leads to some really weird things, right? But I think Roger lost his reception and is calling back in right now. So let me see if we can grab Roger and bring Roger back in.
Yeah, I had
Welcome
an
back,
issue
Roger.
there. Thank you.
Okay. So where we left off, I think, was what are the evidences or steps that would lead Seth and I to believe that pantheism is true?
All right. Hopefully you can hear me better now. Is it right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I heard Seth saying that it was a bit nebulous and out there and Deepak Choprish. And my reply, my reaction to that is that it is not an easy thing to speak about just because the nature of it. And this is not just the justification of it. It's just that certain things are complicated. This is one of those complicated things. Our brain evolved. I don't know if you've seen this new, Donald Hoffman. He speaks about perception and how our brain perceives reality. He talks about the headset up there in the brain and how this reality, our perception, our brain has a lot to do with what we see out there, right? Colors are not really this thing that we perceive or see out there. This quality of color is not real in the universe. It's just this subjective thing our brain generates. And so speaking about things beyond this illusion
so
that
Roger,
we call reality.
I hate to interrupt you, but maybe I didn't phrase my question correctly. I don't need like a deep explanation about what you believe. I think we can get there later if we need to. I want to know, why do you think what you believe is true? Like, I might say, listen, I believe that all rocks are gods. And then I could go into detail about that belief. But none of that would explain why rocks being God is true, right? So we want to know the information that would lead us to the conclusion that pantheism is true. I don't think a deeper explanation of what pantheism is gets us to that point.
What makes it true? Okay.
Yeah.
So obviously first we clear up the term pantheism. Pan means everything. In Greek, theism, God. So it's everything is God. And then defining God being omnipotent, conscious.
I think we know the definitions, right? We're good on definitions. We want to know what's the argument or the evidence that makes this stuff true.
Okay. Firstly, why pantheism and not just a separate God? Because I think that the universe is like a superset of everything that it contains. So ultimately, it is all one thing. here they joke about the monad, but in my perspective, like I could explain that. I want to say why pantheism, right? Why pan? Why everything? And
but we can believe that the universe is a superset without believing in God, right? So I'm trying to get to the pantheism part.
Oh, I know. Yeah, but pantheism is a composite word, and first I want to explain the pan nature of it, and then the theism aspect.
We're good on the definition. We don't need definitions. We're looking for an evidence or an argument.
But you're asking me how I can. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Roger, you're a really nice guy, but you might not be in the right place tonight. Maybe write down on a notepad some evidences for why it's true.
You're asking me the question. I answer the question, and
go ahead and call us back when you've got your notes together. It sounds like you haven't thought through this yet, and that's fine. Sometimes we believe things we haven't thought through the arguments for yet. We hope the best for you. Call back again soon, but next time, be prepared to answer the question, pantheism is true because of blank. Am I wrong here, Seth? Was I being mean to him?
Was Roger just yeeted? Would that qualify as a yeet? What just happened to Roger?
I
was
yeeted
politely
him.
escorted. You're right. I mean, you weren't getting any answers to any questions, and it was like talking to a random word generator. So I don't know that would have been a productive call anyway. And I think the chat is probably thanking you. Thank you for releasing us from pantheism, which still has not been defined by Roger. By the way, it still has not been properly defined by Roger's version of pantheism. Is simply it's out there in the ether somewhere, and maybe somewhere those molecules will join and become an organism. Right now, they simply have not, so we're going to move on. I totally agree.
All right, because I think we can get some substantial conversation into the show still yet. We've got one theist named Jim coming in, which interestingly enough, no longer a Christian, an ex-Christian, but still a theist, says that he believes there's something behind the world, this snapshot in time, deconstructing or constructing, he says. So it sounds like you're trying to figure out what you believe still, Jim. Can you kind of fill us in on what you currently believe, and maybe we can talk about that?
Okay, what I currently believe. Well, let's get this out of the way. I agree with you with the God of the Bible. He's kind of a jerk. Okay, so I don't really believe in that God. And then all of a sudden, if I say 10 Hail Marys, I'm forgiven, and then I'm all clear. Okay, but I just, as far as my belief, okay, and this might be a terrible example, but I don't exactly need a randomized double-blind placebo to prove that my mom loves me. I just think there's a lot of innate stuff that we just know, and as far as the snapshot deal, there's just a lot of beauty, and I know you've heard this, you're tired of this maybe, but there's beauty in a sunset. You're never going to get that back again. It's never going to be November 15th, 2025 again. And I just think some things are, and you guys want evidence, but it's like, to me it seems, and I'm not nitpicking at your intelligence, but it seems that there's never enough evidence. Or whatever the evidence might be, it's not good enough.
I don't know of any evidence, right? So you didn't actually list any evidence. You just said, when I look at the world, I feel like there's a God. Well, when I look at the world, I feel like there's not a God. Like the feels aren't an evidence. So we would need something more substantial than look at the trees.
Yeah, that's very fair. I'm just saying that. Can you give me what evidence would be good enough? And I'm not saying. I just feel in something greater than me, and maybe this will be better said like this way. Okay, I guess you yourselves, and this isn't degrading you at all. Maybe you yourselves.
Why do I feel like you're about to degrade people?
What's that now?
So why do I feel like the words out of your mouth are about to be degrading?
Well, no, it's not. Well, it just may seem that way. I'm just looking for a better word, I guess, and I couldn't find one. But when you're asking for evidence, you're maybe taking on the role of a god yourself, as silly as that may sound, saying, "Show yourself to me." You know what I mean? It's.
If I asked you for the evidence of the tooth fairy, would that mean that I'm in the role of the tooth fairy now?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I get that, but
do you believe we should believe things that are true that are based on evidence, or do you believe that we should believe things that are not true?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. I'm not,
Then there should be some kind of evidence. Like, if you're not able to articulate the evidence, that's fine. But like, I'm not willing to believe things without evidence.
Yeah, that's fine. But it's like.
So like, I'll tell you one thing, and my answer is different than some of the, more famous examples that you've probably seen from others like Matt. I think I know what would convince me. Like if for example, if a God wrote a holy book that, first of all, had actual good evidence, it was written on a material that was completely incorruptible in a language that everybody could understand. And in every single prediction in that book came true, even if it was completely unreasonable predictions, then fuck yeah, I'd believe that God existed. If out in the stars, every single language was found, all the stars were configured so that it said God is real in every single language, that might be pretty convincing. Like, there's a lot of things that may or may not be evidence for me personally. I can't speak for anybody else, but I know this: if God was real and it wanted me to know it, it would know what it would take to convince me. And I'm inclined to believe that the God either doesn't exist or doesn't care if I know about it, or else I would know about it. Am I crazy here, Seth?
No, I think you said it perfectly. I'm interested in Jim's motivation. Jim, I mean, you feel that there's probably something out there big. Pardon me. I'm going to finish the sentence real fast, and then it's all yours. You feel there's something out there bigger than you. All right? Did I track on that?
Yeah. That's fine.
Okay.
It's simple, to the point. Yeah.
What would that thing be bringing to you that you would take personally enough to want to call and defend it on the show? I'm trying to figure out what drives you. What are you trying to maybe convince us of, and how?
What is the entity bringing to me in a physical form or through my thoughts, or is that correct?
You tell me.
What you're asking?
You tell me. What do your feelings about a deity? I mean, first of all, do feelings prove anything? But secondly, you're obviously taking what feels like more of a deistic position, and you feel strongly enough about it to call and defend or plead your case here on a live broadcast. So I'm just trying to get under your skin a little bit and find out what we're talking about here.
Yeah, you're fine. I don't know. And maybe it sounds like hippie talk, but it's like, I guess I lost where I might have been going with this, but
well, let me maybe do this. If Justin and I are unconvinced, we don't have that feeling that there is something out there. What are the consequences to us? Because I'm guessing this particular other, bigger than us, is not a specific God with a proper name. It's certainly not the God of the Bible, the Quran, etc. So if we were like, we don't see it, we don't feel it, we don't buy it, what are the consequences to us if we simply live as if that deity doesn't exist? We just get on with our day.
I don't think there's any consequences at all to you. I mean,
cool.
Seems like it's a battle not worth waging. Then.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not selling the idea. If you don't believe you're going to the burning place, I don't believe that at all. I don't believe that.
No. Even if we're not talking about eternity and torment and all that, no consequences, no punishment. If it has zero real impact as to whether or not we think it came from here or there, and we're just living our lives as if it doesn't exist, It doesn't matter. Right? It's all academic. It's not even all that interesting. Like, why?
Sure.
Why take time and energy to even go there?
Yeah, that's great point. Yeah.
It is.
Well, then doesn't that? Well, can I flip that back on you? Well, then why the effort with the show?
Well, the problem, and I spoke about this earlier, is that God belief very often doesn't just exist in a, well, I think there's something out there, but I'm going to live a secular life, pretty much. That's not the model for a tremendous amount of God belief. Quite often, and I would even say usually, a God belief translates into something that is actionable, that has a ripple effect. And if we look at religion's influence, fundamentalist religion's influence on our culture, and religion started this, right? So whether it's the contaminating of school curriculums, whether it's pushing a single religion across the state church line to turn us into Gilead, whether it's foreign policy regarding Israel, whether it's the Old Testament justification for capital punishment, whether it's the persecution and prosecution of LGBT people, whatever. Very, very, very often the religion, there is a fundamentalist religion behind all of that, and it just goes out into the culture. And so then what are the rest of us supposed to do? We have to respond. This is not this is not an action. This is a reaction. If religion was not doing what it was doing worldwide, there would be no need for conversations like this, and Justin and I would be doing other things. We are here because religion started this. That makes sense, doesn't it?
Oh, perfect sense. I can buy that. Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, I agree that there's definitely some force behind it and some, what do you want to call it?
Forgive me, Justin.
Looking down upon from your elders, all that type stuff.
I would add one thing to what Seth said, and I assume we kind of agree on this. Even if the only thing that benefited from these discussions is that humanity came to know something that was true rather than not true, I think it'd be a worthwhile discussion. I think humanity benefits from knowing and believing things that are true as opposed to things that are not true.
Yeah, I believe that. Yes, it's just
Jim, do you think that believing in the God benefits you?
No, I don't believe it's gonna someday get me the dream house I want, or
but does it provide you hope for an afterlife? Do you think fear of death, like the facing your own mortality, plays into this belief that you've got? Because you used to be a Christian, you deconstructed from that because you've got some good sense about you, it seems like. And like I was like you, when I left Christianity, I held on to the God belief for a while before my brain was able finally to say, no, none of this makes sense. But like part of my wanting to hang on to the theism partially was because I didn't want to believe that like the end was the end, and that 1,000 years from now nobody will even know that I ever existed. Right? These are difficult things to face. But I mean, the reality is like, eventually the truth comes knocking and you have to open that door.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a part of me that, what is it in the line from Dead Poet Society? We're eventually food for the worms, carpe diem, so maybe if we're just food for the worms,
right,
that's fine. I just think I just think there's, if you want to call it electrical, spiritual, I just think there's some deep connection, like when you call your sister you haven't talked to in 6 months and she says, oh, I was just thinking about you. I just think, there's this connection between everybody. I don't know what it is, but
it's called empathy. We were a biological society where we were evolved to have empathy for others because it helped us to survive as a species. That's why,
Sure.
by and large, we don't do what lions do. Like stepfathers don't go and kill the young of the lion that they just married in humanity, only in lion brides, right? Because the thing that helped us to evolve as a species is cooperation, empathy, caring for one another, and that's why we have this biological need. It's also one of the reasons why we have this biological need to believe in a God sometimes, because we are wired so heavily to have a parent over top of us that even when we're older and our parents are no longer here, we still feel like there's some sort of parent watching over us. We quite often call that thing God, but it's just an evolutionary trait.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It makes it easier on us. I can, like they said, put the weight of the world on his shoulders. Okay, it's like if I can just pray for, rather than somebody who's dying from major heart disease. It's like maybe put down the steak and the butter today instead of saying, "Oh, I'm going to pray for you." That it's easier to say I'm going to pray for you, and
Sure.
that way I don't have to do the hard work.
What do you say to the? No, you're fine. The hundreds of thousands of people that lost loved ones or were maimed in the Haitian earthquake in 2010. Why would there be a God that created this entire shit show just to create it with natural disasters to randomly pick off 100,000 people a year, babies being born with bone cancer, parasites that crawl up your urethra, babies born with Lesch-Nyman syndrome scratching their eyeballs out? If there is a creator God and it created this shit show, it seems like it's completely evil. The only logical conclusion I think we can come to is that either there's no God and the universe is chaos and that accounts for the chaos here, or the God that created this shit show is just a maniac. But I don't think the maniac God makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, definitely not. Yeah, and
thanks for calling,
that's a very
Jim.
good point. Yeah.
Jim,
Yeah,
you're on the journey. You're going to be okay. We'll see you in a couple years in atheism. Okay, my friend.
All right. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Thanks.
Cheers.
Sorry, Justin. I could not help myself. It's a great point,
It's
though.
perfectly okay.
We are pattern seekers. I was using this analogy where someone's like, well, I bumped into Susie at the store the other day, and I'm like, what are the chances? Oh my goodness, there must have been, the universe must have wanted us to meet, and I'm like, well, no, you're a pattern seeker. And as and you've walked into that store 300 times and didn't have an encounter. Honestly, statistically, you will have serendipitous convergence in your life, and you may assign agency to that convergence because you are an evolved pattern seeker. And often we're like, wow, that must mean something. I had somebody who had a relative pass away and they loved a certain kind of bird. I can't remember which one it was. We'll call it a cardinal. And a few weeks later, they were out and a cardinal landed on the tree at a park or in their yard or wherever. And they were like, oh my gosh, she's checking in on me. Well, what's Occam's razor say is that, Aunt so-and-so is checking in, or are there squillion cardinals in the state of Oklahoma, right? So I understand the desire to believe. I also understand the pattern seeking tendencies we have. But beyond that, I mean, if it doesn't really have any application to our lives and we're all living as if it doesn't exist anyway, who really gives a shit? Maybe that's reductive, but that's kind of where I fall on that. Maybe I'm too dismissive.
I'm with you as well.
Maybe. Okay. All right.
I do believe, there were a couple good words in the Bible, and I still believe in eat, drink, and be merry because tomorrow we may die. We don't know that there's an afterlife. We know there is this life. And I know I want to enjoy this one and help others to enjoy it. I'm never going to throw this life away, hoping for a better one to come. But nevertheless, I think we have one more theist in the queue. It looks like Del Boy from all the way from the UK is still hanging on to the idea of a super being / God and wants answers. So what I'm gathering from the chat log is possibly they may not be fully believing. They might be deconstructing. Doughboy, welcome to the line. You're talking to Justin and Seth. Can you kind of fill us in on where you're at?
Yeah. Hi, both. I listened to your show quite a bit, and it's partly the reason that I rang your show, because you guys come across really well, and I hang on to the belief in a God because I'm scared that there won't be, if that makes any sense. So I'll try and explain why I think that, because I just feel like I've had a few experiences in my life that, that can be explained by normal ways of explaining them. I had an experience many, many years ago that didn't really make sense to me at the time. I was too young to really understand it. But as I grew older, I felt like I'd had some sort of message. And I know what people are going to say online. They're going to say, well, there could be explanations for that. There could be something in your brain going off, or it could have generated from within. And I accept that. That's a possibility. But also, I don't know, I just felt like it didn't come from me somehow. And that experience was that I realized that the Bible was wrong through what I was told. And what I mean by that is that I had this experience where I met this, I don't even know what to describe it. It wasn't human. And basically, it told me that there is this super being that looks after us, and the Bible has been rewritten in so many different ways that now it's lost the plot almost because there's too many people out there trying to reinterpret the original message, which was not meant to be said of the way it was. So how am I trying to explain this? So this super being is not what is presented in the Bible, basically, and that is why I left the church.
Well, let me ask you a few questions, because it sounds like you've kind of deconstructed yourself, and that's fine. It sounds like you're on the journey, right? And that's we all were. All of us were on the journey, you know what I mean? And so what is the thing that is keeping you still believing in some kind of a God? Because I hear personal experience, and there was a moment in my life where I felt personal experience was a good explanation for why I would still believe in a God, even though Christianity wasn't true. But I think it falls short. For example, if I think God is giving me some sort of sign or coincidence in my life to demonstrate his existence, it's weird that God would intervene in my life that way and then do absolutely fucking nothing for the 3 million children that are dying of starvation this year. Weird that God would intervene in that particular way, but then allow earthquakes to take out the Haitians, or volcanoes to take out entire cities like Pompeii. It's to me, the personal experience doesn't add up when you look at him allowing all these horrible atrocities. It doesn't make sense that he would step in for this minute, tiny little detail and then not care one bit about every child sitting in St. Jude right now.
Yeah, totally. I can't dispute that at all. In fact, I'm very much going over to that side of thinking as well. I would agree with what you've said in the sense that when you get these horrendous events that go on Earth, you look around you and you think, who's in charge of this? I'm like, it does make me question that a super being can be this callous with us, and I don't like it, and in fact it actually creates a huge problem inside me, because I know exactly why you said that, because it's like saying, hold on a second, if there is something in charge, why are so many people let down? So I get exactly what you're saying, and as a former Christian, a devout Catholic, I've got a lot of hang-ups. But, you know, all I can say is that when I had this very small experience where I was told something from whatever this was, it's always stuck with me, and it basically says, look, God is not straightforward. Well, let's not even call it God. It called itself the One. I don't know why it called itself that. It said, I don't know why everyone calls me God, because that's not true. In fact, I'm not as straightforward as people think, in the sense that the Bible and many books misrepresent the super being. And what I mean by that is that this super being is not trying to be good all the time. I know that sounds strange, but and I couldn't.
Okay,
I
let me jump
tried
in.
to ask.
Let me jump in.
Yeah, go ahead, Seth.
If I may, it's been brought to my attention in the chat that Del Boy is the name of a satirical character in a British sitcom who was kind of a swindler. Can you explain Del
You're
Boy
right.
to me?
It is. But that was just my nickname at school. Don't worry about it. It's nothing. That's
Okay.
not. That is not. I'm not trying to do any silly jokes or anything like that. I'm
So
being
this
deadly
isn't.
serious.
We're not being punked here, and you're not calling and playing devil's advocate.
I'm not joking around. I cannot assure you of that. I know what you're saying, and whoever did that digging there, that's great, because it was one of my favorite shows when I was a kid. So the nickname stuck with me because
Fair enough.
Anyway.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, so
I'm sorry, Justin. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So my apologies if that got mixed up there.
No,
but,
you're good.
So just to go back to what I was saying, so one of the other things that came to my attention as I got into science is that the moon is so perfectly equidistant to the Earth, and one of the things this whatever it was pointed out that it was placed there for a reason.
I mean, for now it is. Like, it won't always be.
Oh, okay. That's
like
true.
So the moon's distance isn't
so
always.
I'm hearing
gonna be
riffs
the same.
on I want to believe, and I see patterns, or I see things that look serendipitous to not have agency behind them. But I think Justin's point was, if you're going to go and pull wow, look at where the moon is, it's amazing. Wow, look at the atmosphere which sustains human life, and you're going to do the look at the trees thing, then we have to say, somebody explain a planet that's constantly trying to kill us, explain the bad stuff, explain poor design in the human body, explain cancer, explain tsunamis, explain the Dave Matthews Band. You have a lot of explaining to do, Del Boy, if we're going to talk about fine tuning. You know what I'm saying?
So can I try and explain
if your God's on the hook for Dave Matthews Band, we got some problems.
We got some problems.
Let me tell you something, right? I am on the level. I'm not trying to be difficult or anything.
That's fine. That's fine. We'll take you at face value. But we're on the clock here, so I want to try to get to wherever your destination is if we can.
Okay, yeah, sure. So my destination is, the reason I hold on is because of this very strange experience. I can't explain it, but it led me to still believe that there is something called the One out there. I've been holding on to it because of the things that I'm not very up on science. I listen to your show and I try and understand all these different terminologies and everything, and I still hold on to it because I just hope that I'm right. Because if everything is poorly designed, then the God is fallible, or whatever it is fallible, and that in a way doesn't make sense. But then what they explained to me was that it's not meant to be infallible. So the point is that mistakes have been made along the way, and I don't know. I can't explain it. It's really difficult.
Did your God create everything, or did it become a super evolved entity?
Okay, so the experience I had, I was very young, and this whatever it was.
Well, hold on. I need to answer the question, friend. The God that
Sorry.
you currently believe in, is it a super evolved entity, or did it actually create all things?
It's created a lot of things and made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah,
That's
but did
what
it
I
create all
understand.
things?
I wouldn't. I'm not sure about that actually. To be honest with you, the only thing I got is the impression that we were like a project, and we were part of a greater experiment. Which
So it sounds like the God you believe in
with.
is a bit of a goof, right? In order to believe in a God that created all this, you kind of have to believe that he's a bit of a goof, and he's bumbling around and can't quite find the answer. What makes more logical sense? That there's a God out there that created at least the existence that we're finding ourselves in, but it's like a bumbling idiot, or that there is in fact no God and that you hallucinated your experience with the so-called God, because we know for a fact that hallucinating gods exist. They happen all the time. We don't need a whole lot of time to find all the scientific data on people hallucinating gods. In fact, even hallucinating messiahs. 100 people a year get hospitalized with Jerusalem syndrome. They go to Jerusalem and they think that they're the reincarnation of Jesus because they're so overwhelmed by the mystical experience of being in the holy city. People hallucinate religious experiences every single day, but unfortunately, we have no evidence of God every single day as well, which means the more likely scenario is that you had a hallucination, not God reached out from the ether to grab you.
Yeah, it's a very plausible answer, and I can't I can't argue it, can I? Because it's a possibility. But all things being equal, I don't know why I would even have been talking about the moon today. I hadn't planned to, but it was just what I remember from that original, and I had no reason to even investigate the moon. And then I looked into it after that experience when I got a bit older, and then I realized that there was something quite special about the tidal waves and all that sort of thing. I know there's other, like you've said, there are things that this super being got a hell of a lot wrong, and there are still huge issues going on this earth with a lack of care for its alleged creation. And I totally see why you say what you say. And to be honest, I actually agree with it, because I get very frustrated because I want to go back to that original conversation and say the things that you said, which is basically, hold on a second, you can't just say that you've made mistakes. That's not good enough. That's just not good enough at all, because there's a lot of people depending on, if there is something out there, you taking charge of that and stopping all this unnecessary death and destruction and disease and issues with the human biology, like you've said. And that is why part of me turned away from the Bible completely, because that didn't make any sense to me, because that's exactly the moral dilemma I had inside. I was thinking, hold on, I can't hold on to the Bible because for the very things that you've said. And I turned away from that Bible, and I said, that's the orthodoxy that makes no sense, and it's been corrupted.
We're certainly glad that you're on the journey and you're deconstructing. We appreciate you calling in. I think we got time for one more caller. And we're glad that you can kind of see the logic of what we're talking about with your God. And we hope to hear from you again. Perhaps maybe next time we hear from you, you'll be on the atheist side of things. We'll find out.
Yeah, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. I'll carry on watching your show. And I really appreciate you having the respect to listen to my my feelings and everything. I know they come across crazy, but hey, that's life, isn't it?
Thanks, Delboy.
Thank you very much for your time.
Cheers, friend. Man, 2 in a row deconstructing pretty heavily. I feel like it's almost palpable, like the feeling of watching somebody deconstruct in real time. It's kind of painful to watch from the outside sometimes because you feel bad for them. Seth, when you were leaving the faith, was it a traumatic experience for you? Because it kind of was for me.
On a number of levels, because when it's your identity, when it's who you are, everything that you had believed once was true may not be true. Wait a minute. What's my life look like? What's the rest of the world look like? What will I lose? You know, it was rough. I remember when I was deconstructing, I was laying in bed, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't sleep. My gut was in a knot, and I was just like, it literally was like being in a whirlwind. And I'm glad I went through it. I wish I had had an organization like Recovering from Religion at the time, somebody I could reach out to and just, without judgment, just say, "Can I talk to somebody?" Because I felt totally isolated. And you know, a lot of people don't either they really don't realize it or they really do understand that when you deconstruct out of a high control culture of any kind, the next question becomes, well, what do I think? And who am I? And what's the rest of my life look like? What are my values? You know, what's going to happen? The future becomes a scary, but often in many cases, an amazing and even more wonderful place. Like I'd never go back. You know, people have often asked, would you take the pill to go back to the Matrix and you could be all happy clappy and it would be just simple and you could be part of the club where everybody accepts you and be part of that cultural majority thing? And I'm like, hell no. Despite the challenges, I am much more fulfilled. I'm much more satisfied. I'm happier. I have a greater sense of purpose. I don't have all of those arguments and the red flags and the alarm bells going off in the back of my skull when things didn't make sense and I had to go with it on faith. I'm good, man. You know, I'm delighted. So I was able to sort of go through that gauntlet and come out the other side. And I think one of the reasons that activists do what they do on every level today is maybe to make the journey better for others, maybe even easier for others who are going through the same thing.
Yeah, I felt much like you. The way you described it was really good. It's for me, it was kind of like I was sitting on a stool and someone had just kicked the stool out from under me, and you wake
Yeah.
up with a bump on your head, and you're like, "What the hell just happened?" And you're like disoriented, and you're trying to figure it out. And sometimes I hear callers coming in, and I feel like they've experienced the kick of the stool, but they're still on the ground, and it's hard for me to watch it because I remember what it felt like for me. You know what I mean?
Well, and another, not to, I know we've got a call, but another trend that I have noticed is that you have to think of it in terms of a bullseye. A bullseye is not, it's not a bullseye, but I just picture the target. So you're in the center, and that's a high control fundy culture. But then you start to say, oh, wait a minute, you know, I have people who in my life who are non-hetero. You know what? I don't. I'm not going to hold to the anti-gay verses in the Bible. So you sort of write that off. And you know, yeah, you know, some of the stuff in the Old Testament may be accurate, but some isn't. So you step out a little further from the middle. You know, the Bible is maybe mostly metaphor, interesting stories with moral codes in them. So you step out even further. Well, it's not the Bible. It's a religion. It's not a religion. It's a relationship. Jesus lives in my heart. So then you step out even further. And then, you know, you continue to sort of walk away from the fundamentals. And a lot of people end up in that weird nebulous deistic zone, right? Where you're like, I'm not really a Christian. I'm spiritual. I think there's something out there. And I understand why people wade in those waters and don't go any further, because the implication often is, holy shit, what if this is it? What if there is no one or anything in control? What if it's a finite life and it's annihilation and blah, blah, blah? And what if I may lose everything in my life if I admit that I am not a God believer anymore? And so it's convenient for a lot of people, totally understandable for them to stay in this place where they say, you know, maybe yeah, we don't know what we don't know. You know, I'm just kind of there, I'm spiritual. And, you know, so I have a lot of compassion for those people. Those
Mhm.
are difficult steps, those next few steps where you say, is there any evidence to believe there are any gods anywhere? And the answer so far, I'm convinced, is absolutely not. You know, keeping people inside in there, it's like medicine. You know, it just keeps them from having to really do something that might cause them pain, but in the end, I think might be healthy for them. So,
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm gonna take one last caller only because it's gonna be less than 5 minutes to answer his question, and it sounds like he's thought about it a little bit. There's a question from Connor about Isaiah 53, and Connor, I'm sorry, it's closer to the end of the show, but I think we can answer your question pretty quick. It sounds like you're trying to figure out how to interpret Isaiah 53. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I actually have. I'm definitely on the side that you present whenever you are confronted by people about Isaiah 53. But I actually just wanted to. I wanted some more elaboration on it. May I explain my point?
Sure.
Okay, cool. Also, it's good to talk to you again, Justin. You talked to me as Jestero, the possibility.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and what's it called, Seth? I've never spoken to you, but it's a pleasure, good sir. And I got to give acknowledgement to Doug back there. I see you, Doug.
We got to move, buddy. And we got to move toward a point. Let's do it.
You're right. You're right. So I spoke with a lady who claims that Isaiah 53 verse 5 is a prophecy about Jesus. I pointed her to Isaiah 49 verse 3, where it talks about Israel being the servant, but because she has read that Israel is referenced as a female, and Isaiah 53 verse 5 states, "He was pierced through for our transgression." This points to Jesus and not Israel being the servant, is what she claims. I disagree with her, but I understand why she has confusion. So how could I best clarify this to her?
Israel is very rarely referred to as a she. Usually it's Jerusalem. The cities are usually referred to as a she. I would take her to Isaiah 41, 8 through 9, where it says, "You, Israel, my servant Jacob, whom I've chosen." The you, Israel, is also my servant in the singular, actually masculine in that case. Same thing with Isaiah 43:10. There's a plurality of people. He says, "You are my witnesses, says the Lord, and my servant, singular, whom I've chosen." There's the same thing in 44, verse 1 and 2, and in 44:21. There's the same thing in 45:4, "For the sake of my servant Jacob and Israel, my chosen." So Israel and Jacob are the servant. And my favorite is 48:20. He says, "Go out from Babylon, flee from Chaldea, declare this with a shout of joy and proclaim it, send it forth to the ends of the earth, that the Lord has redeemed his servant Jacob." The entire arc of Deutero-Isaiah is that God is redeeming his people from Babylonian captivity. That's chapter 40, verse 1, all the way to chapter 55 for Deutero-Isaiah. Every last word in that section of text is about the Babylonian captivity, and we're told 8 different times that Israel is, in fact, the servant. So the reality is we have no reason to believe that the entirety of this prophecy is about Israel and Babylonian captivity, except for this one tiny little chapter. For some reason, we have to talk as though it's about something happening hundreds of years later that doesn't even fit what the rest of the Old Testament says. When you interpret it as Israel, it matches every other prophecy about the nation of Israel. You don't find a single messianic prophecy that talks about this happening to the Messiah. Therefore, it would lack Old Testament contextualization, and my interpretation actually matches the context of the rest of the Old Testament prophets.
I agree with you. And hey, thank you for letting me chime in and ask that question. And I appreciate y'all's time.
No, you're very kind.
Sure thing. Not a problem.
I like to watch you work, Justin. Yeah, you just right off the tongue. I mean, it's like I can't remember why I walked into the room. Like, did I come in here for keys or coffee or what's going? And you're just like yanking this information off the top of your head. That's remarkable. Not all heroes are made. Some are born, Justin, and I think you may qualify. So.
Sometimes, some people have a skill. And this is like the skill. Don't think that I'm good at everything. I'm good at this one specific thing.
Okay. Well, you're very good at it. And it is a pleasure. It's a pleasure to have been a co-host alongside you. You're just fantastic at what you do. Let's do it again. And I'll buzz you. Maybe we should do something for the Christmas season on the Nativity, because I always like to go back and tell that story on my channel. So I'll buzz you.
Yeah, I'd love to. And Seth, I'm kind of the outsider in the atheist movement. Now, I recently just got online like 2 years ago. But from my vantage point, like, you're an absolute legend. Like, I'm so thrilled to be able to share a screen with you. So I'm having a blast here today. They say that you shouldn't meet your heroes, but I disagree. Sometimes you should.
Well, I'm very kind, and I'm hugely humbled and flattered. And thanks everybody for watching and playing along today. And yeah, I'll see you back here on the next one. We'll do it again. Have your people buzz my people. Sounds like a party.
Can't wait.
All right. All right.
See you, friends. Have a great one.
Right.
Stay godless.
See you later.
I don't know why the music isn't showing up. It's
all right.
weird. It's
all
quiet.
right. We're so good we don't even need backup, baby. We just go.
I thought maybe it was playing and I couldn't hear it. This is fine. This might be a good time to warn Seth that there's now a meme floating around in my Discord of him holding "help me" on his forehead on a Post-it note. It's preserved for all of history now. It's now going to be an emoji.
You are welcome, world. That's my legacy. All right. God be less.